燃え上がれガンダム。Welcome to Weekly Suit Gundam, the special bonus podcast brought to you by the folks at the Weekly Stuff Podcast. I'm Sean Chapman.
And I'm Jonathan Lack.
And we are returning to the wild and wacky world, not of Universal Century Gundam, but of Gundam in general, the future Century Gundam. We're in a whole new landscape, Jonathan. This is the beginning of part 2 of the life of Weekly Suit Gundam. It's just unventured territories from here on out.
Absolutely, because we have done all the Universal Century shows. Some of them we did sort of mini reviews on in the 1 Year War wrap-up episode, so maybe we'll have to go back to some of those, like War in the Pocket someday. Mm-hmm. But we have at least talked about every Universal Century show.
Yes.
And now we are moving forward to hopefully talk about every Alternate Universe Gundam show, and then someday we'll have to get further down the barrel and do SD Gundam.
Yeah, we will figure out, there are lots of weird SD Gundam shows. Eventually we're just doing... This is how I get you, Jonathan, to finally read Romance of the Three Kingdoms, is that there is a Romance of the Three Kingdoms, let's call it a loose adaptation of Romance of the Three Kingdoms in SD Gundam form.
I'm happy to watch that.
I watched the first half of the first episode of it and this is fucking weird.
Yeah. So anyway, lots of Gundam, but we are starting where all Alternate Universe Gundam started today.
Yes.
With Mobile Fighter G Gundam from 1994. The raddest of the Gundams.
Yes, it is without a doubt officially the most radical Gundam that exists.
Yes.
Or ever can exist, really. It's one of the most radical anime ever created.
We both love it, obviously.
Yeah, it's utterly fantastic. This is my second, as with all these basically, this is my second time watching through Mobile Fighter G Gundam. Or this is second in a couple of extra, because I did watch, and we'll probably talk about this, I did watch some episodes back in the day on Toonami in 2002. Which is 2002 is 18 years ago because we are old now. But yeah, we're now getting to the point where Gundam was coming out in the West. It's just the whole vibe and world of Gundam takes a massive shift here. But of course, this is, Jonathan, your first time watching any of it. So as we like to start these episodes, I want to hear what are your general impressions and feelings watching through Mobile Fighter G Gundam.
Sean, I loved Mobile Fighter G Gundam so goddamn much. I said this to my brother the other night. It might be my favorite Gundam behind the original.
Wow.
Now, favorite doesn't necessarily mean best.
Yes.
Because I think if I were saying, and that's not to put down Mobile Fighter G Gundam in any way, just qualitatively best is tough because this show has very different ambitions than Zeta Gundam, which has very different ambitions than Unicorn Gundam, which has very different ambitions than War in the Pocket, which is also obviously one of the objective best. Hard to call it a favorite because it breaks your heart into little pieces.
Yeah.
But I loved every single moment of Mobile Fighter G Gundam so much. I felt in the best way possible like a kid watching this show. It is so high energy. It is so good. It is so imaginative. But I also just think it is a phenomenal show. It is so well paced. It has such great characters. I think it is, understanding its ambitions is important because this is very much the shonen anime version of Gundam, but it knows those conventions so well. It knows how to work with those. It knows how to create the best scenarios to bring out the best in that genre. Like I said, I think it's phenomenally well paced over, it feels like a 2-season show, even though it's one 49-episode run. And I think it builds to a great mid-season, mid-run climax. And then the second half is really good, and I think the last 15 episodes or so are the best stretch of the whole show, which is very rare to say for an anime that truly not that its early stuff is bad, but just it builds steam, and then it is so good at payoff. There are very few shows that are this good at just the meat and potatoes of paying off stuff you've built up. It's got, I think, maybe the best music in the whole Gundam franchise. Fucking Kohei Tanaka just killing it on that music. The saxophone in this show gives me life. I loved Mobile Fighter G Gundam. I don't think I could love it anymore if I tried. And my one sadness when it was over was like, I'm sad there's no more of this. Because like you watch the original Mobile Suit Gundam, great. There's lots more in that continuity if you want it. This is all there is there's some manga stuff that I could seek out at some point. But like, I was a little bummed. I'm like, because this is like, I want to see that 14th Gundam fight and see like Doman Kashu's and Rain's son go into battle or something crazy like that. Mm-hmm. But I adore this show, Sean, and I would really recommend it to everyone, even if you've never, I don't know how you're on this podcast, if you've never seen any Gundam, but if you don't want to commit to all the Universal Century stuff, and you just want to watch one 50-episode anime, this is kind of maybe the one to do, because there's nothing else with it. It's just this. You don't need to know anything. Like, there's some fun Easter eggs, like, oh, the Neo-Japan ships at the end are very clearly Zeon ships. There's things like that.
Yeah, there are lots of cameos of different mobile suits from previous Gundam series in, like, the big shots, particularly near the end where you have big fleets where it's like, oh, hey, there's a Zaku, there's the RX-78-2. Like, if you like the mecha, there's, like, fun little Easter eggs. But it is... Totally, it's 100% its own thing.
Yeah, and it's great, and I couldn't imagine a like better way to kick off Alternate Universe Gundam, because as much as at the end I also like kind of wanted to see more of these characters, I also like immediately went and put Gundam Wing on my iPad so I can move forward and just see more of this stuff, because I'm like, this show proves as much as any other sequel that Gundam has legs.
Yeah.
And if anything, more so, because this one says, okay, Gundam can be a recognizable thing, even if you completely change genre, and if you change tone, and if you change continuity, and all of that, action style, everything, it still feels like recognizably part of the Gundam brand. It does a lot of the stuff well that we say Gundam does well. And it's like, yeah, and you watch this show and you understand how Gundam is still going strong with new alternate universe shows all this time later, because like, okay, they lit the fuse. This is great.
Yeah, it is. I also very much love G Gundam, but this is going to be an interesting episode because I think you clearly like it more than I do, because I like it a lot, but it is I think of the Gundam series that we've done so far, I think it's the weakest of like Mobile Suit Gundam, Zeta, Double Zeta, Victory Gundam. I'm not going to have OVAs is very different. Yeah. It's definitely better than Stardust Memory. No doubt in my mind, it is much better than Stardust Memory.
Yes.
But like I do think it is, because G Gundam is a very strange beast in so many ways. In that like it is not the show that you usually expect it to be. Because I think honestly one of the biggest flaws of G Gundam, which is not what you would expect given like the basic pitch of the show, is I think generally speaking the action is not very good. I think it's like, especially compared to Victory Gundam in the first half of Victory Gundam, where the action is just spectacular, or even EVA, which has some really, really great action sequences. G Gundam is in a budgetary situation where the action is incredibly limited. Most fight scenes just boil down to Domon getting beat up across like panning over still images, with Domon going, ah! And then him making some sort of revelation related to the plot of the episode, and him going, this hand of mine glows with an awesome power, his brain grip tells me to defeat you, here I go, shining finger, and wins. And then I think maybe over half of the fights in the whole show that Domon participates in, he wins. Literally the only thing he does is just the shining finger.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And I think it's a feature, not a bug.
Yeah, but it's something that like it makes the like choreography and stuff like that of the action is not necessarily great.
I will put an asterisk on. I think that stretch I talked about gets much better.
It gets much better once things start coming to a head near the end. Yes, I absolutely agree that I think the last 15 or so episodes, once like everything clicks into the place and it starts heading towards the direction you know it's heading in, it's like, okay, yes, it is by far, that is like the most powerful section of that show, and it is fucking amazing. But then the other thing that the show has in terms of its structure that I think is largely intentional, but it I think does end up hurting the show in places, is it is extremely formulaic. Like, it is very much Saturday morning cartoon style. Each episode is self-contained. It is extremely rare that you have anything that is like a two-part episode. Obviously, there's an ongoing narrative, but it is a lot of, this week, Domon's opponent is this guy. Let's see how he defeats him. And then even within that, there's like an inter-episode structure in that, generally speaking, the show does a Domon episode, a Chibide episode, a George episode, a Saisaishi episode, and an Argo episode, and then a Domon episode. And it breaks that up in places, but normally that is like the loop it goes on, and it kind of goes in this like 5-6 episode cycle. And there are places of the show that I think that gets a little bit repetitive, and it kind of hurts it. And like those are things that I think the show has some of these clear flaws. But what the show has in terms of fully committing to its very strange identity, and what the show executes on in terms of its like melodrama, and this like really, I think at its heart the show is a soap opera more than anything else. Like that element of it is so fun, so well done, and just that sense of pace in that, and like the character dynamics, the music, and the way that the music heightens everything that goes on. And the core cast of characters, particularly Domon and Rain's relationship, and then Master Asia and his relationship with Domon, those core relationships in the show I think are so well envisioned and executed that in the G Gundam, while I think along the way is a very rocky show, I think that final stretch is so good because they are very diligent in putting the pieces in place. And the ending of the show, and like particularly the last like 5 or 6 episodes, basically like the couple of episodes that finish off the Devil Gundam stuff, and then the last episode of the show that sort of puts the bow on Domon and Rain's relationship. I think those three, the Kyoji episode, the Master Asia episode, and the Rain episode at the end, are some of the 3 best episodes in the whole franchise.
Yes.
Because of how well it pays off the things that have been built up along the way. And so it ends up being, while I think is maybe a little bit weaker than the Gundam shows we've watched up till now, it is still, for me personally, one of my favorite Gundam shows. And we will see why I say that in shows to come.
Yes. And I think part of this, because I don't really disagree with anything you're saying. I think some of the things that you identify as flaws, I would identify as flaws, but then I would say I kind of like that they're there. Uh-huh. There's something about that, and I think part of this is, I think if you and I break down our tastes in anime, I probably like shonen anime more.
Sure,
this kind of like formulaic, like, you know, I'm someone who's watched like all of Yu-Gi-Oh!
Uh-huh.
And
yes, I don't know if I could do that.
And I've read half of One Piece at this point, and, you know, different sorts of things. You and I both obviously love Dragon Ball, which is the granddaddy of all shonen anime, but like,
I think G Gundam is more in the Yu-Gi-Oh camp than it is in the Dragon Ball camp.
100%. Yes. You are totally right, because shonen obviously is a broad term. I mean, literally, Weekly Shonen Jump is a magazine that's been going forever and has 20 comics in it every week.
And it has action and romance and drama and comedy. Like, there are a lot of different genres that are represented under like the umbrella that we use for shonen.
And I actually think one thing that's interesting about G Gundam is it does move through them.
Yeah.
Not like all of them, but it does take on different identities at different points. Like, it is a romantic... like, I actually think at its like heart of hearts, it kind of is a romantic shonen show.
Yeah, I mean, Domon and Rain's relationship is the best romance in the Gundam franchise, at least for me.
Well, because it's very overt. I mean, it's very...
it's what the show is about.
Yeah, I mean, this is actually something I find very interesting about the show, is it only really has 2 main characters who are in every episode.
Yeah.
Because by the end, it's developed a very big cast, but obviously through the first like 15 episodes or so, the only regulars are Domon and Rain. And then through the show, they're the only 2 who appear in every episode. There is one episode, it's the penultimate, where Rain's voice actress does not have any lines. So Domon is the only one with lines in every episode, but those 2 are the ones who are there for the whole thing, and it starts on the 2 of them, and it ends on the 2 of them very wisely, and it expands out in the middle, and has lots of other great characters. But that's something that certainly distinguishes it from any of the Tomino shows, which are big, sprawling ensembles from the first episode to the last, no matter the show. So yeah, it's...
I mean, you have to have a big ensemble cast if you want to kill 20 people in the last episode, right?
Yes, absolutely you do. You have to make us love them so you can hurt them. Or if it's Victory Gundam, you have to just have barrels of characters you can bring in to replenish. It's like a fucking Fire Emblem campaign.
Yeah, it's just basically the scene from Monty Python. Bring out your dead.
Yes.
Here we go. Pile them on.
Which Victory Gundam does have more death, or G Gundam does have more death in its home stretch than you would think.
Yes.
Given the kind of show it is, but it is not ever to the level of, they don't kill Rain, you know, they don't do that in the last episode. It makes me think of like in Zeta Gundam, when in the final episode Kabil is with Emma, and her body like floats up. They never do anything that sad in this. But yes. Anyway, yeah, so I think there's some things that it does in that sort of Saturday morning cartoon style, like a Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Pokemon, obviously, is actually a really good comparison here, too.
Yeah, that's not
where I think it gets kind of the core of some of that stuff, but it does it better than I've ever seen for those sorts of shows. And I think its main things are it's an incredibly well-written show. Like, even when it's super hokey, and it is often very hokey, it's so winkingly, knowingly, like, it has such a mastery over its tone. There's very little in the show that I, like, roll my eyes at in a way that I feel like they did not intend me to roll my eyes at. I agree that there are parts where the structure gets a little repetitive, but generally, like, the characters are strong enough, and the kind of aspects of that repetitiveness I enjoy enough that I kind of am on board with it. Like, yes, on one hand, I do think it is a flaw that most of the fights are kind of bad, and they all culminate in Domon having a personal revelation and then going, this hand of mine is burning red. It tells me I must defeat you. Shining Finger, or, Bakuhat's God Finger.
It's got the finger! Yeah.
Yes. But it's really important that moment is so awesome every time. Because if it weren't, this show would get old real fast.
Yeah.
When it is that awesome, you kind of notice it, but you're also like, but am I ever going to say no to that actor doing that line and that music coming in?
I think more my point would be you could have a fight that culminates in him going Shining Finger rather than a repeated series of one-sided beatdowns that end in him just going, okay, now it's time to use the Shining Finger.
Yeah. I do think there's a middle section of the show that goes in a loop with the 4 members of the Shuffle Alliance. A little too much. But I also fucking adore those characters, and to me, the moment I identify as G Gundam kicking into its highest gear, those last 15 episodes, is when they do the cycle of Domon having to fight each of them the last time in the finals. Those are the 4 best episodes for those characters individually, and then of course they each get their episodes where they sacrifice themselves for Domon in the Battle Royale, and those are also fucking phenomenal, and like the payoff is so good, I'm kind of okay with how they get there. So yeah, is it a perfect show? No. Am I going to say it is like objectively as good as a Zeta Gundam or War in the Pocket? No, I wouldn't say that. I actually do think this is a better show than Victory Gundam, personally.
Interesting.
And I think we're both on the record. We very much like Victory Gundam, love Victory Gundam. We're pro Victory Gundam, but I definitely found the overall like pace and like thrust of this smoother. Because I think one thing we both talked about is it feels to us like Victory Gundam peaks before the end, and the last stretch is good and impressive in a lot of ways, but feels kind of messy.
To be fair, I would kind of say that about, because the last 15 episodes for me has an asterisk of like the 2 episodes before the last episode I think are a little bit...
Oh, I love them.
I think the problem is Urube is not like well established enough as like a character that I give a shit about, that like his stuff is like, oh, okay, yeah, we have like another character we need to fight before we actually get to the range stuff.
But, overall, like, this show has such a good forward momentum trajectory to me, and is at its best when it is paying off the big shit, whereas Victory Gundam, for me, is best kind of in, like, small moments, off moments, like, not the big climactic confrontations. They're both great shows. Like, there's not a loser here. And actually, there's a lot of affinity between the 2 shows, because so much of the staff was the same, which you can kind of tell in some of the animation style and things like that. But boy, I mean, should we now talk about the history of this, though, Sean?
So let's talk about how this show kind of came to be before we start diving into it. So we're in like the mid 90s. We're at 94. Obviously one notable thing that happens here is Tomino, the sort of lead creative for the Gundam franchise up to this point, who had been the main director and writer for every mainline Gundam entry until now, until G Gundam, with obviously like stuff like War in the Pocket as an exception, but all the
that's like the only one at this point, right?
Yes. And so he's basically been the guy that has been the Gundam dude. He's like totally burnt out by this point, and Victory Gundam is the point where he moves from having like 1 or 2 movies or like TV shows a year that he like creates to having a more sporadic what was like actually like is a more regular output of work. Because when I was looking at his filmography, there's just, he basically was the main writer-director for a different 50-ish episode TV show every single year since about 1977 till like 1994.
That's fucking nuts.
And there are some years, like 1982. Jonathan, let me just tell you all the things that he was writer-director for that came out in the year of 1982. Mobile Suit Gundam 2, Soldiers of Sorrow. Mobile Suit Gundam 3, Encounters in Space. Space Runaway Ideon, A Contact. Space Runaway Ideon, Be Invoked. And the 52-episode anime Combat Mecha Zabungle. All of those came out in 1982. So a TV show that had a different episode air every single week of that entire year, and 4 different movies, 2 of which, Encounters in Space and Ideon Be Invoked, are mostly new footage. And for Be Invoked, like half of that movie is totally new story content. That it's not just a clip show. It's like whole new stuff. So he was stupidly prolific in the late 70s and throughout the entirety of the 80s. By the time you get to Victory Gundam, he's sort of burnt out, and so then it becomes more periodic. He has like Garzy's Wing, which is an OVA stuff in 96. He's got Brain Powered, which is like 24 episodes, 98. Turn A Gundam, which I'm very excited to get to that in 99 to 2000, and then it gets even more periodic till there. And then after that, his last and most recent like main show is Rekko and G, the Gundam series from 2014, which we'll get to eventually. So,
and right now he has credits for the movies that are coming out.
Yes, yeah, and like he did like the Zeta movies in between there. Like he did stuff in that period. But point being, while Tomino's still involved in making anime and movies and stuff past this point, he's still involved in the Gundam franchise periodically here and there. It's no longer his vision guiding it, and he's kind of taking a little break right now. But Sunshine is still all go ahead.
Sunrise,
the production studio, is still all go ahead on Gundam. But Victory Gundam, while we really like it, was not a huge success in the ratings. So basically what happened was Tomino steps away. Sunrise wants to make another Gundam series because even while the ratings aren't always great, the toys still sell like fucking hotcakes because the toys have been selling like hotcakes since like 1980, basically. Like Gunpla is always a huge fucking seller for Sunrise and Bandai Namco. So they decide we're going to go ahead with another Gundam series, but basically they want to do a very different direction. So the core pitch of what G Gundam is doesn't come from a creative voice coming in and saying this is what we want to do to make for our show that we want to make. It effectively comes from the sponsors and producers at Sunrise and the like Bandai and the people making the toys, who they want to, one, recenter Gundam on the demographic that, technically speaking, every Gundam thing other than like some of the movies like Char's Counterattack have been for children. Like, remember, Mobile Suit Gundam is supposed to be a kid's show. Victory Gundam, one of the reasons why Uso's so young in Victory Gundam is that they were supposed to kind of realign it to make it more of a kid's show again after it got very, like, philosophical and shit with Zeta, and especially Char's Counterattack is not a kid's movie. And Char's Counterattack was not supposed to be a kid's movie. It was meant for, like, all the ages and kind of more adults. But they were like, we need to actually make this fucking kid's show for kids for once in this franchise's goddamn life. So that's where a lot of the ideas around...
I mean, we really need to stress Victory. If you are someone who hasn't seen Victory, but has seen, like... It is the darkest Gundam show. It is, at least in the Universal Century stuff, like, it is brutal. It is traumatic. If you were a kid watching that in Japan in 93...
It would traumatize you.
Yes.
Absolutely. So they're like, we need to recenter this. And so a lot of the stuff of, like, having it be a big tournament, a lot of the ideas around having, like, different Gundams that represent the different nations, those came from representatives from the sponsors in Bandai for the show wanting to make different toys. So a lot of that kind of core pitch and premise, not any like the story stuff like Domon and stuff like that. That's the actual creators, but that sort of core premise comes from Sunrise and Bandai and the sponsors. Who they bring on to be the director of the show is a man named Imagawa Yasuhiro, who had worked with Tomino on a number of different things, like most notably Zeta Gundam and the show that Tomino created the year before Zeta Gundam, which was Ora Battler Dumbine, which is a show that I have the Blu-ray set for. I really want to watch it. It's fucking supposed to be crazy. It's like fantasy, mecha, like bug suit. It's like, seems super weird. I'm really excited to watch it at some point. But he had directed a bunch of episodes on that. He'd done like storyboarding, all that kind of stuff. So he had worked pretty closely with Tomino, and he had also done a number of different super robot style shows, most notably the show Giant Robo, which I've always really liked the aesthetic of, and I want to watch that at some point as well. It's like a big OVA series. So he had directed a bunch of those episodes at this point. So they bring Imagawa in, and they basically, okay, you're going to be the director. What do you want to do? And he created some designs and pitches, and they're like, we're not going to do any of those. We're going to do this. We want to do this tournament thing. And Imagawa is effectively faced with a choice there of either you be stubborn and try to like fight against that direction, or you do what Imagawa did, which he's talked about this in interviews. And one thing I like about G Gundam is the Wikipedia for G Gundam is incredibly well sourced. So it's like research for this was so easy because a bunch of like really useful interviews are just linked there. It's like outside of like Mobile Suit Gundam and Zeta Gundam, I think it's the most well sourced Gundam Wikipedia page, which is weird. But so Imagawa has talked about basically what he did was, instead of fighting that direction, let's lean into it. And he's like, let me take all of that, but make it my own. And so he really likes world cinema. He really likes like movies from all over the place. And so he used that as some of the inspiration for going to like America and China and France and Russia and all the different locations they go to, and like really kind of wanted to embrace the weird thing they were asking him to do. And he just leaned all the way into it, all the while trying to find ways to inject his own like sort of like aesthetic preferences and storytelling tastes and stuff like that. And that's sort of the cocktail from which G Gundam is born, and it's really interesting. And so G Gundam is a little bit more successful in the ratings than Victory Gundam was, but it did help bolster pretty quickly the sales of Gunpla even more, thus ensuring, you know, Gundam Wing, which would come out the next year, and so on and so forth, and helped kind of the Gundam franchise make this transition where it was no longer attached to this one continuity in Universal Century. So, you know, part of the idea of we're going to a totally other continuity came from this pitch. And then also it is no longer attached necessarily to Tomino as a creative voice. It can be a bunch of different things. And then consequently also is not necessarily attached to the real robot genre that Gundam effectively birthed. It can now be a ridiculous super robot, like super over the top super robot style show, and do that as well. And that's sort of the main sort of cocktail under which the utterly bizarre thing that Mobile Fighter G Gundam is born. And I think it makes sense when you're watching the show that it absolutely feels like something that was created by a producer's bad idea, because I think it is a bad idea on like paper. It is not a great pitch. And it's the kind of thing of like, people have ever seen that like really famous clip of Kevin Smith talking about him making one of the Superman movies that died in like pre-production work, and a producer that just really wanted a giant robot spider in the climax of the movie. And Kevin Smith is like, that's fucking stupid. No, we're not going to do a giant robot spider. And then the movie got canned. And then the year later, Will Smith's Wild Wild West came out, which that guy produced, and it has a giant robot spider at the end of it. So it's that kind of thing of like someone who is paying the bills has this stupid fucking idea of a giant world tournament that has different Gundams that represent all the nations and all this bullshit. And Imagawa even said in an interview, you know, this is obviously after the fact, so who knows if it's true, but he even said it's like, because one of the criticisms of G Gundam, we'll talk about this in the couple places I do think it manifests, is that maybe some of their cultural depictions are not the most sensitive versions of that, and that was a complaint he had. And they're like, but it's like weird space. It's not actual America that has like a weird football boxing Gundam. It's Neo America, right? It's the weird Neo future America. So it's fine. And so, you know, a lot of those ideas are not great on paper, but Imagawa decided to take this team that, as you said, is mostly a lot of the core team is like episode director, scriptwriter, stuff like that. Most of those come over from Victory Gundam. So it's a largely similar staff to Victory Gundam. He takes them and says, let's just fucking go for it. Let's completely lean into this, and let's take this dumb producer style idea and make it something that is like, it's still dumb, but now instead of being dumb in a bad way, it's dumb in an utterly amazing way. And that's how G Gundam is born.
Yes, because I think I can't stress enough how all those things that seem dumb on paper are so good in the actual show. Like, it is such a rush in the first half of the series every week to see what is the new country we're going to and what is its Gundam going to be. And like, yes, are all of its cultural depictions like totally like, deep and like thoughtful? No. But they're at a certain point, because every single one of them is so thoroughly stereotyped, you can't really be mad at it. It's such a cartoon version of everything. And I also feel like it is so across the board loving and like interested in going to other places and engaged with like, well, this is cool. We get to create a Gundam for every country on Earth. How fun is this going to be? And there's a sense of that, like, taking the kind of dumb idea and having genuine fun with it. And I think that sense of fun comes through in G Gundam in a way the sense of burnt out clinical depression comes through in Victory Gundam. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Like, they're both there. They're just on obviously opposite sides of the spectrum emotionally. And I love that about the show. And I think it really does feel like something that was made with like kind of passion and joy, even if maybe its circumstances are not ideal for how you would go make your dream show. It feels like Imagawa really ran with it. And I also think the show is just generally very well, like, obviously some of the budgetary restrictions are obvious. I think it's a really well-directed show.
Yeah.
I think it frequently strikes on, like, really, like, beautiful frames, or, like, it has good ways of viewing sequences. It does fun things with characters. You can kind of tell, I think, the underlying team is Victory Gundam, because that same sense of week in, week out, even on a tight budget, we're turning in really impressive work is there. I think it's a well-boarded show. I think it's a well-cut show, all of that. So... yeah, it comes from a weird place, but God, am I glad it exists.
Oh, yes, absolutely. It is just such a bizarre show. And so then it ushers in this whole era of alternate universe Gundam stuff, where it is totally set in its own continuity. The only other stuff that's set in the, like, quote-unquote, future century timeline, which is what this world is referred to, are, like, some light novels, manga adaptations. There's, like, a Saishi manga, there's a Master Asia prequel manga. I think there's like a brief sequel-esque story that is told in a manga form. But generally speaking, like, Mobile Fighter G Gundam is just this one 49-episode TV show, and that's it. And there's something that's kind of like beautiful about that. Like, it would be fun to see more highly produced stories that are set in this ridiculous universe, but there's something nice about this feeling of like open and closedness.
Oh, totally, yeah.
That then continues. That again is the tradition for stuff like Gundam Wing, Gundam Seed, all that. Maybe some of them have OVAs and a little bit extra stuff that is more sort of part of the front-facing side of the franchise rather than the manga stuff that's a little bit more obscure. But generally speaking, from this point forward, it is just totally self-contained, 50-ish episode TV shows that go on for forever. Who knows? We're still not done doing them.
Yeah. Is there one airing right now? Is Gundam Build Divers the one that's on right now?
Gundam Build Divers is, the one airing right now, which is, I think the Gundam Build thing is kind of its own offshoot. I think we're waiting on, like, the actual successor for Iron-Blooded Orphans at some point.
Yeah, because we're not at a point where they're on every year the way they were in the 80s and 90s.
No. Yeah. So, it's every couple of years you'll have a new big Gundam show. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, well, should we dive in then to the majesty that is G Gundam?
Yeah. So I think...
can we actually, before we get...
Okay, yeah. I know you're the one who just suggested it, but yeah, go ahead and interrupt.
Sorry. I want to say one thing before we start about the title.
Okay,
because I think this is something that they dropped this after the 90s with Gundam, but the couple of 90s Gundam spin-off shows all do something special with the title, and in Japanese it's even more notable. So it's obviously Gundam is always Kido Senshi Gundam. That's Mobile Suit Gundam.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Mobile Warrior is another way to translate it.
Yeah.
But this one changes it, and then Gundam Wing and After War do something different, and then after Turn A they go back and they're all Kido Senshi Gundam, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yes.
But this one is Kido Butoden G Gundam, which is like Mobile Fighter is a pretty good translation, but that Butoden, if you recognize Buto from like Budokai, like that kind of same, like, it's a martial arts. It's like mobile martial artist G Gundam.
It's like mobile martial arts legend, basically.
Yeah.
Like Den, it's the same as like Den Setsu and like the Legend of Zelda, Den Setsu no Zelda.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's Kido Butoden G Gundam.
Which I like. I just like that title a lot. Mobile Fighter is a good English title, but I also like Mobile Martial Arts Legend would not be a good title in English, but it is awesome to say.
Yes, yeah, it is, yeah. And I do like how, the G Gundam stuff, because maybe this is also something I should say, going back to, this kind of opens up to the beginning of the show, this is a very rare example, and we'll have this next week as well, of a Gundam show that I first saw in English when I was a kid. So basically, Gundam Wing, which is a show that comes out next year, 96 in Japan, came out in 2000 over here in Toonami. It was the first like major Gundam production that got dubbed in English. There's like, I think a couple of the Mobile Suit Gundam compilation movies did and stuff, but there was nothing like big that got brought over here. So they aired it on Toonami on Cartoon Network, and I think there's also like a less censored version that was on Adult Swim. And so I saw some of that when it aired, and I never really liked Gundam Wing when I first saw it. I like it more now, but I'm also not a huge fan of it necessarily. I'm excited to see how my thoughts develop as I rewatch it. But so 2000 Gundam Wing, super hugely popular, like more popular in the West than it is in Japan. It's still popular in Japan. It's more popular than G Gundam, but Gundam Wing was huge over here. Alongside stuff like Dragon Ball, Yu Yu Hakusho, like that big boom in the early 2000s.
Yeah, I don't think I watched. I mean, I'm sure I saw bits and pieces of it. I don't remember watching Gundam Wing, but I sure as shit remember the commercials and like the Toonami guy talking about it.
Yes, yeah. And so because that was so successful, they then tried to bring a bunch of other stuff over here. We talked about when we did Mobile Suit Gundam how Mobile Suit Gundam started airing shortly after in the West, and then shortly after that 9/11 happened, and like totally fucked over the release schedule of that show. So probably Mobile Suit Gundam would not have gained, the original show gained huge traction over here anyways, because it was so out of style. Because Gundam Wing, it's weird to say Toonami house style because Toonami didn't make any of those shows, but they were very particular in what they selected and what worked. And there was a certain kind of style of mid-90s anime in particular that did very well on Toonami. And so Mobile Suit Gundam and some of the other stuff they brought over didn't work very well. But Mobile Fighter G Gundam is exactly in the Toonami sweet spot, that it is mostly action, is that shonen style, episode-to-episode story stuff. The aesthetics are very mid-90s. It's got the big music. And then when you do the English dub, it's got a bunch of great voice clips you can put into a Toonami-style like commercial promo. So my main memories of G Gundam from like 2002 and 2003, which when it was airing over here, is I would catch a couple of episodes. The main things that stood out to me were the Shining Finger theme, which is still, I think, one of like the all-time great anime songs. The song that plays whenever he does the Shining Finger, and they do a very dramatic version of it in the last couple of episodes when that theme comes back. And that theme has stuck with me basically my entire life. The Shining Finger special move, which is the best finishing move in all of anime. I'm sorry, Kamehameha, but it's just true. The Shining Finger is perfect. We'll go into detail with that. And I like distinctly for my whole life, the Shining Finger as a concept in the image of the big glowing hand that blows up the robot's head, that has been with me forever because it's so cool. And then also the English dub actor for Domon's line deliveries of things like, "This hand of mine glows with an awesome power. Its burning grip tells me to defeat you." That kind of stuff. Or his line delivery of, "Take this, my love, my anger, and all of my sorrow." Those playing over Toonami promos that happened all the time. I swear, even after G Gundam wasn't even on Toonami anymore, those line deliveries were so perfectly Toonami. They just used them all the time. And so it'd be like that dude saying like, "Here I go, Shining Finger!" And then Optimus Prime going, "Up next, Mobile Fighter G Gundam." And it's like, that was my childhood, basically, was a lot of that kind of stuff. So that's like my memory of it growing up. And so then obviously I was very excited when the time came around that I was actually watching Gundam stuff properly. I'm like, oh, here we go. You know, imagine, you know, like that being my reference point for the Gundam thing that I liked, because everybody else likes Gundam Wing, and I didn't really care for it. I really liked Mobile Fighter G Gundam, even though I didn't necessarily see a lot of it. I did catch the occasional episode here and there. And that was my main reference point for what Gundam, and I knew that's not what the other Gundam shows were like, but in my head, I was like, in a weird way, I was building back up to the nostalgia of what is this show actually like. One, you know, the Japanese voice acting is much better, but there's something about that original Domon voice actor's performance that it's the right kind of bad, that I will always have that in my subconscious of like his very particular line deliveries, because I think that dude understood the show that he was dubbing and he did a good job. But yeah, and I think the thing that's most satisfying about G Gundam is that it is a show that holds up to the nostalgia so well, because most shows that are like that, in your memory, it's just all the ridiculous cool bits and you forget all the like bullshit that happens. And G Gundam is basically just all the ridiculous cool bits. That's most of what the show is. The show is what you remember these kinds of Saturday morning cartoons. And it's not like if you go back and you watch an episode of Transformers and it's like 90% just awful, trash, garbage, just terrible. Like most of those old cartoons are just the worst stuff. And Mobile Fighter G Gundam is like, no, this is exactly the show that I wanted it to be, and that it is, and that it still is, and I still love it for all those reasons.
Well, the first word that I ever, I think, said to you about G Gundam was, it's so pure.
Yes.
And it is, like, that's the thing. It is so purely what I think you strike on the right term, what you want it to be, what it wants to be. Like we talked about Imagawa, like, making this choice of, like, I'm going to make it the best it can be under these circumstances. And it is such a pure distillation of all the things I think you, me, the fandom loves about this kind of show, that you're right. There's like nothing else in it. There's not like the annoying character you forgot about who's awful and you don't want to see.
Yeah, there's no Schnarf from Lion King or whatever, right? There's no like weird kid...
I think that's Thundercats.
Oh yeah, Thundercats, sorry. Or what's like Orko from He-Man, you know, like all that kind of like the weird kid character that's like in Sonic X, which I always remember like watching that when it like the first episode of that and being like, oh awesome, a new Sonic cartoon, this seems cool, and then there's a kid in it. I'm like, this sucks. Like why do you keep on putting dumb kids in your dumb kid shows? Because dumb kids don't want to watch dumb kid shows about dumb kids. I want to watch martial arts legend, the King of Hearts, Domon Kashu, who's 20 years old, I guess.
I mean, notably the first adult Gundam protagonist.
Yes, the first one that is not an adolescent. I mean, he's just outside of adolescence, but he's the first one that's like he's almost of legal drinking age in the West.
Yeah,
he could drive.
He would be tried as an adult in a court of law.
Exactly, for murdering all the people that he murders of this TV show and never really thinks about.
Yes, but that's really key. I mean, that's part of, I think, what this show gets is that it gives you all the stuff you want to see, either as a kid or the kid in your heart, or I think even better than saying just the kid in your heart, the like part of you that just wants this like kind of pure, high emotion, soap opera, fantasy action, right? Kind of the same thing that like a good wuxia movie or a good kung fu movie activates in you, right? And it gets all of that. And so, you know, it not being about a kid is actually really key because kids don't want to watch shows about kids.
Yes.
They want to watch shows about teenagers or just awesome adults doing cool shit. Like, or Domon, who is an adult who's kind of a kid and has to grow up over the course of the show.
Like every kid loves Batman. Yes. What kid loves Robin? I love Robin now as an adult because I see the function he performs and I like a lot of the characters that they've created for Robin. But as a kid, no kid wants to dress up as Robin for Halloween. You want to be fucking Batman.
Which is why the 1966 Batman got it just right, where he's literally like Robin's dad and teaching Robin lessons. Exactly. And then you're just a surrogate and it works. But yes, all of that, I'm fascinated by, you know, because I actually don't remember at all G Gundam on Toonami in the West. I didn't watch a ton of Toonami. Yeah. I will more watch like kids WB stuff, but...
Which explains, again, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Pokemon...
I've seen a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon. I think I've said this before. I've said this on the Weekly Stuff podcast, but for Weekly Suit Gundam listeners, I, Jonathan Lack, have seen every episode of Pokemon up through at least like half of the Ruby Sapphire stuff. So that's all of the Indigo League, all of Gold and Silver. I know every one of those. And I've seen at least the first season or two of the Advanced Generation stuff. And then all of the first 7 movies.
Yeah, I think that explains a lot of how, like, if that's part of your baseline experience of, like, one flavor of anime, that Mobile Fighter G Gundam is, like, revelatory in that space of that kind of show.
Yes. Because it is, like, the pure, perfect version of that.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, like, because I've been rewatching Yu-Gi-Oh! In Japanese, and I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a really good show, and I love the manga. I don't like it in an ironic way. I like it. But the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime introduces a lot of bullshit. Like, that anime probably has the biggest filler problems of any show I've ever seen. Like, because it is, like, that show is, like, legitimately, like, half filler. And there's a lot of other issues where they really, like, toned it down from the manga and stuff. And I kind of, there are parts of the anime that I think are perfect and great and elevate the material, and parts you kind of have to suffer through. There's no suffer through in G Gundam. Even if, like, I think you're a little harsher on, like, some of the parts that are objectively a little weaker. You're not saying it's bad and shitty and I want to skip it.
No, I mean, I rewatched this whole... the last time I watched the show was, like, 3 or 4 years ago. It's not been a huge amount of time. And I watched this show faster than you did. Because I started after you started watching and finished a couple days before you did.
Yeah, because this is another thing I should say. This is honestly a sign of a show I like, is that I watched it pretty slowly because G Gundam works so well on the episodic level. Like, each episode is such a nice, compact package that often I would watch one and feel like, that's great, and I want to go do something else. And like that's kind of like, I said that about the original Mobile Suit Gundam, which I thought had a really good episodic structure. And, you know, I sped up at the end, but I kind of enjoyed taking it slow and savoring it. And that's not because it wasn't drawing me in. It's because it was drawing me in a way that, like, when I was a kid, I didn't watch 5 episodes of Pokemon a day. I would watch the one that was on after school, you know? And
it had been long enough that you forgot that it was basically the same thing as the episode you watched last week.
You know, again, I said this earlier about, like, the feature, not a bug. With this kind of show, when it's done well, and, like, the Shining Finger finishing move is the kind of thing that is done, like, literally, no one's ever done that better.
Yeah.
But, like, when you have those recurring elements, like, you come back to them every time. It's like people who watch NCIS or something. I'm sure every fucking episode of NCIS is the same goddamn thing.
Oh yeah,
I know
I've watched some of those kinds of shows.
Or Law and Order, or like whatever.
Let's not play with Law and Order here, okay?
But I'm saying Law and Order is probably a really good version of this, where you do know what to expect from an episode.
I just don't want Law and Order and NCIS to be part of the same.
No, they're not.
That's all I'm saying.
Law and Order SVU. I don't know. Pick a different lesser
Yes,
Law and Order.
if Law and Order SVU and NCIS can be in the same bucket, and regular Law and Order is in its own, it's in the same bucket as Mobile Fighter G Gundam in a very different way.
Yes, but like
every time Jack McCoy ends court, you know, a debate in the court, and he goes Shining Finger and he blows up the defendant's head. It's just great. I love it every time. I stand up and clap.
But like there are built-in moments in all of our favorite procedurals where you stand up and clap, right? You know, Pokemon has good and bad versions of this. You know, Team Rocket blasting off again is sometimes fun, sometimes mind-numbingly annoying because they have to like force Team Rocket into a story that has nothing to do with them, which is like half of the episodes of Pokemon, and they're still doing it, which is amazing to me. They've done it over 1,000 times. But yeah, anyway, I do think that explains some of our split, but I don't even know where we were on all this.
We were talking about Toonami and like moving into talking about the show proper. Because I think one thing that's interesting about the show is it does, like, if we had done this in the format that we did the original Mobile Suit Gundam of doing chunks instead, this is a show that chunks pretty cleanly.
Yeah.
And I think some of those chunks are like really strong, and then some of them are a little bit weaker. And I think the first chunk is very strong, which to me is the first 6 episodes that basically culminates in Domon heading back to the Neo-Japan colony, and episode 6, which is one of my favorites, is where you get the backstory.
Yeah.
Which is also just like low-key one of the most fucked up episodes of all Gundam with what they do to Domon. But that first stretch is so evocative, and it's where like this and the ending are where the budget is the best for the show, which is kind of how it always usually works out. Well, either that or the ending is just Eva and they totally run out of steam. But usually they kind of save the best bits for the beginning and the ending when they can plan the most around it, because they know when it's going to end and they know when it's going to begin, and it's like in the middle, we'll try to make everything we can. And that first stretch is where you just get your introduction to all of our main characters, even if you don't necessarily know at this point that Chibade and those guys are going to be the main characters. I had forgotten that they literally just do one after the other. It's just a series of 4 episodes in a row where Domon fights his opponent to a standstill, and like they don't necessarily become friends, because that's saved for the next time these characters pop up. But it's just like in my memory there was a series of other fights intermixed with this that kind of tried to camouflage a little bit the like. And weirdly, this episode ends in a draw because we can't have this character eliminated from the tournament.
Although, here's something that we should talk about right now.
Yeah.
I love this show to death. I do not fully understand the rules of the Gundam fight.
Yeah.
It is very confusing to me what qualifies for what, because people get seemingly eliminated a lot on this show only to come back.
Okay, so we will readdress this once we get to the second half, because I think the Hong Kong tournament is where this becomes a real problem for the show.
Yeah.
It's like, even though I think the second half of the show is my favorite bit, and I think is much stronger overall than the first half, it does have this. It is a bad tournament arc if you wanted to do tournament arc stuff. We'll talk about that when we get to the
It's not super clean Dragon Ball. Literally, here's our matchups, and for the next couple weeks, you're watching those go by.
Yeah, so it does other stuff. But so the beginning of the show sort of sets up the idea of the Gundam fight. And there's this fun period for those first handful of fights where, and they kind of drop this after the first few episodes, where something will happen, and then Domon or his opponent will say, like, Gundam fight regulations, rule number 3, da-ba-da-da-da-da-da-da. And they'll go through that. And I actually have here, Jonathan, I have the list of the 7 Gundam fight international regulations articles that I can read out to you. This does not include the 3 additional rules that Wang Yunfat sprung on everybody very scandalously at the beginning of the Neo Hong Kong tournament. But the Gundam Fight International regulations are as follows. Article 1, a unit whose head section has been destroyed is disqualified. This is the one that Domon tells us in the first episode when he destroys the head of Mikolo Cariot, Neo Italy's Gundam fighter, who is also a mafia leader, but he looks like a biker.
Yeah.
He blows up his head after saying that, which is a pretty cool power move. Then Article 2, a Gundam fighter must never aim at the cockpit of an opponent's Gundam.
That rule gets broken a lot.
Supplement. Accidental harm. I don't know if they say this in the show. This is in the Gundam Wiki. They say supplement. Accidental harm inflicted on a Gundam fighter during a match is acceptable. Which we do see that.
That's fair.
Article 3. A Gundam fighter may repair any damage to their Gundam as often as they desire and move on to the Championship League as long as the head section has not been destroyed. Which I don't think anyone says that bit. Because that's part of
that would be important to know.
Yeah, it's very important to understand that the only way in the normal Gundam fight for the first half of the show that someone is actually eliminated is if their head section is destroyed. And that's how Domon fights them all to a standstill, is because like their Gundams become either inoperable, or with the Saisaishi one, they're both about to destroy each other's head section, and so they're like, oh, we would just destroy each other and it would be fruitless.
Even though, again, many of the people whose heads he does destroy do still come back.
Like, for example, Mikolo Cariot.
Yeah, because Wang Yunfat is a bastard.
Yes, exactly. So obviously the guy running the tournament, who has won the right to rule all of space for 4 years, he gets to do whatever the fuck he wants. Article 4, a Gundam fighter must take full responsibility for protecting their own Gundam. I guess that's like nobody else can interfere. Article 5, a match shall only be held on a one-on-one basis. They say that one a lot in the first few episodes. That comes up because they like to try to do tag team stuff. And then, in the Gentle Chapman episode, the one that I co-star in, that one comes up because he violates it. Article 6, a Gundam fighter shall not taint the honor and dignity of the nation they are representing. Which that happens constantly, including Domon, who does not give a shit about the honor and dignity of Neo Japan. And then the best rule, and this is maybe where we should start talking about the show, Article 7, the Earth is the ring. That rule is way more literal than it sounds on paper, because the thing I love about this fucking show is that literally from the halfway point of episode 1, where the Gundam fight starts, and to episode like 44, I think, is when Master Asia died. 45. And where Domon wins the Gundam fight, the entire Earth is surrounded, but not the entire Earth, around the equator and like a little bit above and below the equator are quote unquote like ropes, like it's a boxing ring or like, like a wrestling mat or whatever, like professional wrestling that has big laser ropes around it. Obviously not in a way that actually keeps anyone out of Earth, because there are multiple times where people go up and down, like in episode 6 when Domon goes back to the colony. So it's not actually preventing anybody from going anywhere, because you just have to go a little bit north or a little bit south or kind of sneak in between the lasers. But it's just symbolic. They just created this giant symbolic representation of the Earth being the ring by having giant laser ropes surround the Earth, and you just see that image all the time, and it's so good.
It's so good. I love the theme songs on this show, and I think this show really quickly revises the theme song, because the first couple episodes don't have this, but I think it's with episode 6 they introduce the version that starts with Domon's the Shining Gundam jumping on top of the ring, and it does this whole thing around the ring.
Yeah.
And I think the other main like Shuffle Alliance characters are on the different posts, and that's how the theme song starts for the rest of the series, because the second theme song does the same thing. And no, it's a wonderful visual. It's an amazing visual. They literally end the show on the ring like going away.
Yeah.
It's great. And Sean, this makes me realize we haven't actually vocalized the premise of the show yet.
It's true.
The premise of Mobile Fighter, I think we just have to, I know everyone knows this, but just let's digest it. The premise of Mobile Fighter G Gundam is that this is in a, unspecified future century.
Yes.
I love that you would call it the future century while you're in it. That's great. Yeah. But anyway, it's like calling it, postmodernism, right?
Exactly.
This is dumb. But we would do that. Humans are dumb.
The post-future century, which is the century after Domon wins.
Yes. So we're in the future century, and everyone's moved into space. Everyone has different space colonies that are not as scientifically grounded as they are in original Gundam.
No, and important note is that they are they are modeled to look like the shapes of the actual countries. So it's a giant fake Japan, but it's not like a metal Japan. I guess on the inside it's all metal and shit, but it's like on the outside they've got a bunch of like mountains and trees and dirt and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's basically just like all the major countries of Earth are just floating around in space around the Earth.
You know, Neo America has a Statue of Liberty that must be millions of miles high to be as big as it is.
Yes, that is also a like secret like giant laser cannon,
which is the coolest fucking thing,
and is a very accurate depiction of America.
Yeah, no, I love how America's presented in this show. Yes. It's so good. Our main guy is named Chuba D. Crockett.
Yep,
we'll get there. Okay, so we're a future century. Everyone's got colonies. Earth is still there. It's somewhat similar to Universal Century in that you get a sense that like people who are on Earth are more disenfranchised, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But to avert war, all of the countries of Earth have agreed that every 4 years there will be a Gundam fight where Earth is the ring, as you say, and every country will have one participant, their champion, who goes into the Gundam fight, and they will all fight. They will fight, and they will fight, and they will fight until there is one standing, and that country's Gundam, that whoever wins, that country then gets to rule space. They actually say rule the universe, but effectively Earth, for the next 4 years.
Yeah, if it was more exacting like Universal Century, they'd say they rule the Earth sphere. They rule the Earth and then the colonies around Earth. And they earn that right for the next 4 years until this next Gundam fight is held. It's basically like an American presidential election, only instead of voting, you just put all the people that want to try to be president in a ring and have them beat each other to death. Which, at this point, might be better than the system that America actually uses.
Oh, the Gundam fight is, I think, the best form of democracy I've ever seen theorized. Yeah. It's great. So yes. So basically, it's like Space European Union, and the way they decide the Chancellor of the European Union is through the Gundam fight. That's one way to think about it.
Exactly, yes. And so, it's just this way, and we're sold early on as it is this way to avoid war. And then they kind of seed these themes early on, and then they kind of revisit them in the middle, and then they pay off on them at the end. And this is the most Gundam part of the show, which is that the Earth is neglected and is just like used as this kind of dumping ground in a weird giant tournament, like hellscape basically for this Gundam fight. But there are still people living on Earth and living in Earth version of like actual Earth New York City and not space Neo New York City, right? New New York City, as they would call it, because that's of course what Neo basically means. So, that's one of, I think, the most fun parts about this early section of the show. This is actually also something that Imagawa talked about in an interview, is that after the first, 13 or so episodes, once they move into this section where they're at the Guyana Highlands, after they do that, actually, no, they go to Shinjuku, and then they go to the Guyana Highlands, and then they go to Neo Hong Kong. And so they move from this thing that early on, it is this, globe-trotting style series, where somehow Domon is just able to, one episode he's in fucking America, and then the next episode he's in China. It's like how those are very different parts of the planet, and you just got there very quickly.
He's got a big Gundam, he flies.
But the Gundam's not a fighter jet. He just gets there very fast, I feel like. Although you also then find out that the first half of the show takes place over the course of an entire calendar year, which I don't feel like that actually is an accurate reflection of the amount of time they spent, but that's what they say once you get to Neo Hong Kong. But one of the reasons why they make this shift after the first 12 or so episodes is because it started to become very expensive to create brand new backgrounds and things for every single episode for a 49 episode series. I mean, again, it's basically aired every week for a full year, with just a little 3 weeks basically without that. And so that's one thing I think makes the beginning section and the early section so fun, is that it still has the budget and the production pipeline to be able to facilitate. This week, we're getting a look at what this fucked up, dilapidated version of New York City looks like, and the Statue of Liberty's all crooked and shit, and then it gets blown up because Domon hid the Shining Gundam in there somehow, and then later, 30 episodes later, we get another scene that's in New York, and they're rebuilding the Statue of Liberty, and I love that they actually kept that canon. And so then you get one of my favorites is I think the cityscape of France looks really great because it has the Eiffel Tower, which is leaning over, and it looks like the fucking mountain thing from the poster on Nightmare Before Christmas. And it's just all tipped over and kind of curling in on itself, and everything's just destroyed, and Earth is this fucked up wasteland, and you get that in the first episode, which I think is just a fantastic episode of TV that does such a good job of setting its stakes, where you have Italian cop guy who's like just absolutely adamant that the Gundam fight should not happen and it should not be happening here, and he arrests Domon and tries to keep Domon from fighting, and then also shoves Domon's face into a pizza, which I guess is this series idea of what Italian like the police interrogation looks like. That's like CSI, Venice is just cops being like, eat this, and shoving people's faces into pizzas. Like, you killed her. Where were you on the night of the second? While shoving them into pepperoni pizza.
Again, feature not a bug. I love this about G Gundam.
Yeah, that stuff is fucking great. And it's a really great way to set up the dynamic of the show that then the show doesn't focus in on that much past that point, other than when it becomes relevant. Obviously, it becomes very important once you start getting deeper into the Master Asia stuff, that the themes of the show, while they're not complex the way that the other shows we've talked about, like this show is not about really complex, multifaceted themes. Like this kind of like environmental, we should take care of the earth thing is pretty simplistic and straightforward. And the show is also not about like complex character psychology, which is some of the stuff we talked about on mostly when we did other Weekly Suit Gundams.
Yeah.
This one is more about this, like, it's a kid's show at its heart. And it's like, its message is pretty straightforward, is very clear. And it's sort of not trying to sort of muck things up at all. It's just like, no, we're treating the earth like absolute garbage, and like kind of almost literally in ways in this show. And this is bad. And we shouldn't like just be looking at, and this is something that, as with everything with Gundam, it feels incredibly relevant right now with a lot of our like weird, the attitudes that a lot of like our like libertarian like multi-billionaires have, or the Elon Musks of the world, of like, oh, if we just go into space, it'll fix all of our problems for the people who have millions of dollars that can just afford to go into space, and treat the earth and the people that live on it like trash. And that's kind of what the show broadly is about. It uses the Gundam fight to explore that, and the first episode I think is maybe the most effective example of that theme in the whole show, because the visuals are so striking. It's got such a dark aesthetic in that first episode. Most of the show is very bright looking. That first, like, being in Italy, it's just fucked up, and there's like war orphans all over the place that Domon like befriends and finds out how fucked up it all is. And then you also meet our protagonist, Domon Kashu, who is the fucking best. A man who walks around with a big red cape, and nobody asks why, because it's just cool. He has that red cape the whole show, and it is the best thing ever.
And I also here want to kind of make a little comparison to the last show we talked about, Sean, Neon Genesis Evangelion, because Mobile Fighter G Gundam is an infinitely better show in every single conceivable way than Neon Genesis Evangelion, which sucks. But now we're losing listeners. No, I'm kidding. But one of the ways that immediately, because I watched Neon Genesis Evangelion for that podcast, Sean. I finished that show, we did the podcast, and I immediately went and watched a couple episodes of G Gundam just to wash the taste out of my mouth. Yeah. And one of the first things I noticed is how infinitely better G Gundam is at setting the stakes, establishing characters, and getting like mystery set up in an intriguing and compelling way, not a confusing way. Yeah. Because this is a show with a lot of like mysteries and mysterious backstories to fill in, and they're doing that all the way right up until near the end of the show. Yeah. Filling us in on stuff. But it never feels like the show doesn't know where it's going. And this first episode, the first scene is Domon Kashu going into a bar and slapping a photo down and being like, have you seen this man? And it's very Man with No Name. It's very spaghetti western. He is very much set up as that kind of character. And those first 6 episodes are all, we don't know who that character is. We don't know who the person is he's looking for. But we know his motivation. He is a Gundam fighter. And he's from Neo Japan, and his goal is to win the Gundam fight, because that's all their goals. And he's the King of Hearts, and who's like the best martial arts champion of the colonies, which they established at the end of the first episode. And he has a mysterious motive looking for this guy. And he has a friend with him named Rain, who seems like this level-headed lady that's like trying to help him out, but he's like weirdly callous towards. And that's everything you need to know to draw you through those first couple episodes, and the mystery gets you kind of excited and into it. Yeah. And then again, I think this show is broadly very well paced. And like episode 6, they know, okay, we can't draw this out too long. Episode 6 will tell you the backstory, or at least as Domon understands it. Because obviously this will all evolve over time. But they fill you in, okay, that's his brother. His brother stole the Devil Gundam. The Devil Gundam is bad and it can do these things. And his mom died and his dad is in cryo and he's fighting for his dad and to find his brother. And then, you kind of have another level of that draws you on for a while. And then I kind of view the first phase of the show as the first 11 episodes, because in those first 11, they go to a different country each week and find someone. And then 12 is when you meet Toho Fuhai!
Master Asia!
Yes, and then you have the arc in Shinjuku. And that introduces a new kind of mystery where you have this mysterious character, Master Asia, who we knew was his master as a martial artist. He was the former King of Hearts. Turns out he's a bad guy, blah, 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 And the show is just very good at drawing you along with all this, all the way through the end, where the last 15 is when you start getting the revelations about who Schwartzbruder is, and you learn that Neo Japan has kind of fucked Domon over. And I feel like it never leaves you hanging too long or like draws things out too much. There's no mystery that feels like they weren't accounting for early on. It's just so well established, the story, to give you the pieces you need to be engaged with it. And I know like it's an unfair comparison, this and Evangelion, because there's no avant-garde in this show's DNA, right? But it's also like, as I said on that show, I never understood Shinji's character motivations for 1 second in 26 episodes in a movie. I know them immediately in G Gundam.
Yes.
You need to have that.
Yeah, and again, I think the important thing here, because it's the thing that makes those first 6 episodes so fun, is that sense of mystery so well cultivated. It is very much Clint Eastwood style.
I just love that every episode, as he meets a new fighter, shoves them down and projects the photo into their cockpit. Yes. Like, have you seen this man?
And it also has my favorite use of Stalker, who is the narrator for the show. In this section, I think it's like the smoothest use of him, because he's like the best,
He's so great.
But like, because he introduces each episode and he gives like a little bit of background early on of like what the Gundam fight is. Then usually he says, and for this week, the opponent is the Tequila Gundam, maybe one of the more offensively named Gundams.
But it's so good. It's so good. We'll get there.
Yeah. And he'll say like, and this is what's kind of happening. But for those first 6 episodes, before you find out that the picture's about Kyoji and all that stuff, it also then has a little section there where Domon kind of comes into that space and he shoves the picture in front of the camera and says, "Have you seen this man?" The same way he does to all the characters. And there's something about the weird, like, Domon existing in the same realm as Stalker to, like, set up the episode, and him doing that to the audience is so effective. It's such a great... again, like the Saturday morning cartoon piece of it, which is part of what Stalker's like structurally very good at, is like having that narrator help set up the expectations for each episode each week. It's also a very natural space to kind of contextualize any recap material you need to do. And I think it's one of like the smartest things this show does. And that element of it, of any time it can bring Domon or something like that in and like intrude even more onto the reality of the show, is so fun and so just like, it kind of cackles with this like, or crackles with this energy to me of like, it really brings me in. And then, then it like, that energy explodes when every single time you then have Stalker go, "Gundam Fighter, ready, go!" And he rips off his like butler dinner jacket looking thing to be in a referee outfit. And when he does that, he also rips off his eye patch and his eye's fine. There's no reason for him to be wearing that fucking eye patch, and it is the greatest that they added that little detail.
I love that guy. I love hearing... I just get excited every week to hear him go, "Sate, minasan."
Yes.
And I love all the little ways he interacts with the diegesis of the show. Uh-huh. Like, because some weeks they'll start with like a cold open and then go to him. And like, I think it's one of the final episodes, it's like he picks up a rose off the ground.
Yes.
And then he starts talking about like, now everybody, this story is coming to a close, but what will have to happen first? And it's like, it's such a great way, as you say, like, it's an episodic structure. It like couches recap in really compelling ways. It tells you, it's great to just get a little preview of what you're about to see.
Yeah.
I love it. It always gets me jazzed to watch the rest of the episode. I love that guy. And I actually asked you because my assumption was that he was going to be an actual character at some point. Like maybe he'd be the referee of the fight when we got there. And he never is. He's
I couldn't, when you asked me that question, I couldn't remember because I was like, I don't think he is, but it would make sense that he he was, but I don't remember him doing that.
Because, like, he's clearly modeled off the type of figure who's like the Tenkaichi Budokai guy.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Who is a character in Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball doesn't do this with him, although that'd be great if it did. Nisate Minasan, Son Goku versus Kuririn or whoever, versus Jackie Chun. Yes, but no, it's great. I love it, and I actually didn't even realize his name is Stalker. I mean, that's not said in the show.
Yeah, I think that's just like a thing in the credits.
Yeah, that's fucking great.
Yeah, and so you just get that first section of the show, where he's just going around. It's this mystery of who's this guy he's looking for. You know, it's it's such a great picture because it's like the left half of the picture is ripped off and Kyoji's like there smiling and you can see he's carrying like what looks like a kid on his back, but you can't see who the kid is. And like any viewer with half a brain knows that this guy's like his brother or something, that the kid is obviously going to be Domon.
Yes.
Even though somehow Kyoji has not aged at all in like the 10 years of that picture for like Domon being like 10 to being like 20.
Yeah.
It's just like whatever, we're not going to redesign the character of like a 10-year younger looking Kyoji when he would have been like 16 or something.
Most of what we see of Kyoji is as an android or as a like lifeless, half-dead body. Yeah. So, who knows?
Yeah. But you have that picture. You have Domon looking around for him. As you said, the first encounter, which each of what you come to understand then is like the supporting cast of the show, which is Chibute Crockett, George Desand, Sai Saishi, and Argo Gulski.
Sir George Desand.
Yes, Sir George Desand, as he wants us all to definitely know. And every time he fights them to like a standstill, and he projects into their monitor, somehow into their Gundam cockpit, have you ever seen this man? And none of them do. And he's got like a list of countries on the back of the photo that he's crossing off. And the countries are Neo-America, Neo-China, Neo-France, Neo-Russia. And after he crosses them all off, he then goes back to Neo-Japan. And I just want to talk a little bit of that episode 6. Because it is so fucking good. And also so dark what they do. Because it's the most fucked up way to have a flashback possible. Because basically, Neo-Japan brings the Domon back up to the colony. And you meet Rain's dad, the Professor Bikamura. And then you meet this guy, Urbe, who is this weird military dude who has like a big scar that's like hidden by a weird mask thingy. So you're like, well, he's got to be evil because the only people that have weird mask thingies in Gundam, they're always going to be a villain of some form. And they, without Domon's knowledge, drug him such that he starts hallucinating the exact hallucinations they want him to have, which is the day that the Devil Gundam woke up and, as far as Domon knows, basically killed his family and flew, caused his mom to die, caused his father to be basically blamed for everything that happened and to be frozen, like cryogenetically frozen. And then Kyoji escapes with the Devil Gundam down to Earth to wreak like unimaginable havoc on Earth because he's like a crazy evil man and psychopath. And he relives the events of that day. And the moment when they make that cut to where Rain is with him, and then Rain like gets up and walks away from like the dinner table while he's laughing with his family. It's like, ha ha ha, it's been so long since I've seen you, brother. This is so great. And then it cuts to Rain's perspective as she's standing outside and the building is empty, it's destroyed, there's a giant hole in the wall, there's no ceiling, it's like a fucking house in a Fallout game, and Domon's just sitting there alone in this dark room laughing to himself and like having this one-sided conversation. And it is like, and this is where, when I talk about this show being a melodrama and being very good at it, this is a really great example of where this show just knows how to play those emotional notes so effectively. It establishes Rain's character in her relationship with Domon so well, of like how much she wants to sort of like be this kind of caretaker for him, or like caregiver, part of like the dynamic there, because she is literally a doctor and engineer that can take care of both his physical body and the body of his Gundam. And she's just standing there on the outside, not being able to do anything to actually fix the emotional problems that Domon is going through. And like that dynamic is so potent, and that scene is such a great crystallization of it. And then that whole episode, because that's also where the Gundam goes Super Saiyan at the end. And that's where you get the take this life, my love, my anger, and all my sorrow, Shining Finger sword. And when they do it in this episode, they use literally the exact same footage of him pulling out the sword from the opening animation that has the logo of the show in the sword. And they take that out the other times they use that animation in the show, but this time they leave it in. I don't know
so
why,
good.
but it's very good.
Well, it's where I got the key art for this episode
Yeah.
of the podcast is that, and it's where I pulled that from because it's this clean, like there it is. No, even I think the clean. I don't know. I think the clean opening has at least like the lyrics at the bottom, but that's just perfect clean version of that shot, which is such a great shot.
Yes.
God, I love it. Yeah, no, I mean, it's a hell of a way to introduce you to the stakes of this episode. It's also one of only 2 times in the whole show we go to space, because there's this one and then the final couple episodes. This is the most Earthbound Gundam so far. Are there any other Gundams this Earthbound other than like the build fighters are on Earth? Right?
Yeah, build fighters it's obviously entirely on Earth because they're just like school kids playing a weird like sports game. Yeah, I mean, Afterward Gundam X has a lot of Earth stuff, but that's mostly because the second half of the show that would have been in space was cut down by like half, so it's like probably like 2/3 of that show is entirely on Earth. But no, yeah, I think G Gundam outside of something like Build Fighters is the most Earthbound Gundam there is.
Yeah, because obviously Earth is the ring, Sean.
Yes.
Earth ga ringuda.
Yes. Yeah.
Chiku
Gundam Fight International Regulation Number 7. The Earth is the ring.
The Earth is the ring. But yes, anyway, I think we should take this kind of going forward through the show because it gives us such good chunks to talk about.
Yeah.
But while we're going, I think we should talk about the characters as they get introduced.
Yes.
Because in that first batch, that first 6, we do meet our main 4 who will become the Shuffle Alliance, the Shuffle Dome. We get Sir George de Sand, Sai Sai Shi, Argo Gulski, and Shibude Crocketto.
Shibude Crocketto! Yes.
I love them all. I love them. It's one of the magic things about this show that, again, I think the repetition with some of those characters in the middle stretch would be worse if they weren't such good characters, but they're so good. Like, I love all 4 of those characters. I find them interesting when they each come up. Some of their episodes are better than others, but like, they're all pretty well used throughout the whole run of the show. And like, when they all get to come together as the Shuffle Alliance in that closing stretch of episodes is so satisfying. And they also, I think, play it pretty coyly in the early going where I had no idea they were going to become main characters because there are a lot of vivid characters in that first stretch, you know. I really love the episode. I think which is the Tequila Gundam episode? It's episode 7.
Yeah.
The Desperate Fugitive episode. I really like that character. He could have been a main character. He doesn't come back. But, you know, so there's a lot, and you only kind of find out later that, okay, some of these guys are going to clearly recur, you know. But I didn't know, and I kind of liked the sort of organic sense of the show of like, okay, I've seen Argo Gulski a couple times now. He's clearly a main character. Whereas like Gentle Chapman, okay, he's not because he seemingly dies, you know. There's things like that. So it's I like the way they do that a lot.
Yeah, and part of I think what makes it work is like this show does have like a really like all-star cast
they're
for
so
its
good.
main characters. So Tomokazu Seki is Doan Kashu. That he's just in a shit ton of stuff and he's great. If you want someone to yell dramatically as a anime protagonist, Tomokazu Seki is the guy you want to get.
Some all-time great anime yells over the life of this show.
Oh yes, I mean anytime he says Gundam, is the best. It's the best. You then also have Hochu Otsuka is Chibude Crockett. Because I had totally forgotten that this guy plays Chibude. He's the guy who plays. He's probably most well known as Jiraiya from Naruto, who's more or less the Master Roshi of Naruto. It's the best character of that show, and it's a incredible performance. I was really surprised when Chibude started talking because I'm like, oh, that's Jiraiya from Naruto, but that guy is like 20 years older than any of the other. Like, you can't tell from his vocal performance, but I know him as someone who plays old characters. It's any show from like the 90s on, he's always typecast as like an old man. And so he's just playing a character who's the same age as everyone else, but the voice actor is like 20 to 30 years older, which I find funny, but he's so good.
He's so good, and I think where he orients that is into the like kind of gravelly Americanness of the voice. I mean, some of my favorite moments are when he will go, "Goddamn!" Jesus.
The Japanese version of English they used for him is so good. Or I think honestly my favorite moment isn't even one that Crockett says. It's the end of episode 2, which is the one where you get introduced to Chibude Crockett. The end of that episode is Domon leaves. He looks over at Chibude and says, "Chibude Crocketto, omae wa nice guy," and gives him a thumbs up. It's like, you're a nice guy.
So good.
Because, they don't ever actually have to try to make him speak in actual English. They just use, mostly it's like these weird English phrases that have like Indo-Japanese, like culturally as like words. but aren't really how you'd use the dicks. It's like, so it's like the word nice guy. Like, you would never really use that phrase that way. It's like very goofy, but they just like fully commit to it.
Sean, every time we sign off this podcast, I look at you and go, Sean Chapman, you're a nice guy.
Or anytime he says like, I am the champ, and then like, you know, it's very Mr. Satan-esque. Yeah, and Shibune has, I will say, I think the Gundam Maxter is one of the worst looking fucking mobile suits in the whole franchise. It is the ugliest fucking thing ever. It's one of the most unfortunate, because it's not even like, at least like the Neo Holland Gundam, which is just a fucking windmill. At least that's hilarious. That's so funny. Or the Viking Gundam, which is just a Gundam with like a big horn hat, and it has like an actual like Viking longboat.
But see, I love the Gundam Maxter because it looks like the gun cannon if it were built out of Duplos, like the really shitty big Legos. And then like, it's got this like kitschy, shitty American look, and then it's got its dumb boxing gloves. It's got
like a football helmet and like football pad, like fake football looking pads on the front. And then when he goes into like fight mode, the shoulder pad, the football style shoulder pads pop off, go onto his hands as boxing gloves, and the pad on the front pops off for like a tan colored section with abs to make him look like he's a boxer without a shirt on.
It is a shitty Gundam, but it feels so intentional to me in the way everything they do with America is kind of tongue-in-cheek, take the piss out of America. Like, some of them just feel like they don't know a lot about the country and they do something. America is like, clearly they're kind of poking at us, and it's fucking funny.
It is funny. It is also, but it's like, it's so bad looking. It just looks, next to the Shining Gundam or the God Gundam, which are great looking. I think the main Gundams for the show look just spectacular. Like, God Gundam is on my like short list of the figures that I want to get. And then even like the Rose Gundam and the Dragon Gundam, I think look very nice. Dragon Gundam in particular, I think looks very good. The Bolt Gundam, Argos Gundam is like okay. The Maxter Gundam, the Maxter Gundam looks like a jobber Gundam. It looks like a Gundam that should be in like one still frame of one episode and it gets blown up. Not an actual Gundam that appears in like 20% of the episodes of the show.
But that's part of why, I don't know, there's something about that works with like how they treat America and Shibune and everything. I mean, this is, Sean, let me remind you, Shibune Crockett's backstory is that clowns took him hostage and killed his mom.
They're terrorists dressed up as clowns. They weren't actual clowns, okay? Let's not throw shade on the profession of clowning.
I just love, we have an American character. Yeah. What is his, like, tragic backstory? Clowns took him hostage at Coney Island and killed his mom.
And then he's got, like, his whole thing is he's always talking about, like, I need to live up to like my dreams, and it's like he's very like American dreams.
He says, "I'm going to show them the American dream."
Yes, and like pull himself up by his bootstraps kind of character. Like grew up, you know, he's just like a scrappy kid growing up in the slums of New York City, but he was a good fighter, and so he got seen and recruited, and became the greatest boxer in the world. And then he has his whole gang of groupies that he has with him, that are all wearing like pink like boxing like lady outfits. And like suits and stuff that all run around with him. The best of which is Bunny, the one with glasses. And then that episode in the Guyana Highlands where they show the backstory of his groupies, and they were also like punk girls living in the slums of New York City that like, you know, basically ran into Chibune, and he was like taken by their gumption and their like American spirit, and he like hired them and brought them into the capitalist fold. But you see punk Bunny, and she's got like these sharp sunglasses, and it's like they didn't change anything about what the character looks like, just what they're wearing, and she's like the most like librarian looking girl in the world, and then like looking at her like trying to act evil. That it's great.
I love his four groupies. I love that. I love at the end of the fucking clown episode, he says, "You're all my mama now."
Yes, you're like all my four moms.
It's so,
you know, the gender politics of G Gundam are a little bit problematic in places, but as with a lot of the problematic areas of G Gundam, it's so just doesn't give a fuck that it's like
so
hard
pure.
To be annoyed
it's
by
so
it.
Like you're not gonna do your Freudian reading of that and be like he just wants to fuck four moms. It's like no, there's no like bad bone in the show's body.
Yeah, it just goes for it. So that's Shibune Crockett. Love him. Then you have Sai Saishi, who is voiced by Kappei Yamaguchi, who is
Yep.
in fucking everything. Like that dude, like his like credits are endless, basically.
A couple of famous ones. You would know him as L in Death Note, which is one of his most outside of his typecast ones, which is really interesting. And then probably most famously Usopp in One Piece.
Yeah.
Which it's amazing that he is a main fucking character in One Piece and still does a million other things every year.
Yeah, he's in everything, and it scares me.
Yeah.
But yeah, so and he's doing like what is like one of his like sort of like standard character types, which is like young, like spunky boy, as Sai Saishi. And I love Sai Saishi.
Oh, he's great.
He's so good.
I think in general his like Sai Saishi specific stories tend to be the best of the four.
Yes,
him and Argo, I think. Although I like all of them, but his stories, because he's trying to revive the Shaolin Temple. He's got those two guys who are, because they also, all of these four characters have their own supporting cast.
Yes,
and I like all those characters too.
Yes, and the two Shaolin like monks that are his caretakers are probably my favorite. Zuizhen and Kayun.
Yeah.
Because they like to talk in unison and stuff, and they just like they're very funny. I think they're like comic duo shtick works really well in the show.
And the Dragon Gundam is A+.
Yeah,
great.
It's very great. I love anytime they have him use like his big spear thingy, and then they cut to, because one thing that's great about the way the show is directed is they like to intercut with the action that the martial artist is doing in the like full cockpit thing of these Gundams, which is them just doing martial arts. It's basically Pacific Rim, which is kind of where Pacific Rim basically stole the idea from this and EVA for how they handle their mech stuff. But then, so when he's using this big weird spear thing that the Dragon Gundam has, Sai Saishi's controlling that with like his long braid that he has, so it's like his hair flipping out and doing crazy shit, and they never address like how he's doing that and how that's like, because it's not like his hair is wearing the like weird like body tight suit that all of them have. Somehow the Gundam is able to detect Sai Saishi doing this crazy thing with his big braid, and it translates it to the big spear thing, which is how he fights Domon to a standstill.
Yes. But he's great. Love the Dragon Gundam. One thing we actually didn't mention on that point you made about the cockpit is that this is the first Gundam show that does the thing that with EVA would become somewhat standard in mecha, of the, like their movements being mirrored in the, or like their thoughts making the Gundam move or something like that.
I mean, here it's literally just one-to-one movement. They are literally just controlling the mobile suit. Yeah.
But like all the other Gundam, all the Tomino Gundam shows made it much more like flying a fighter jet or something, where there's like pedals and buttons, and it's like, it's not Amuro throwing or thinking a punch. It's a function of the unit.
Yeah, which is how later Gundam shows also are.
Yeah.
Like the only other thing, and this show takes a lot of things from G Gundam, is Build Fighters has a similar kind of dynamic to it.
Yeah.
Which, if there's any like direct successor to G Gundam in the Gundam franchise, it is very clearly Gundam Build Fighters and its like series of shows. They pull a lot from here.
I'm excited to get there far off in the future.
Yes, that's like 2012 or something. We've got a long way to go. But yeah, so that dynamic with G Gundam, I think it's one of the smartest choices they make. One, it gets them to have a really cool, what is effectively like a Sailor Moon transformation sequence that they get to play and reuse that animation a lot. But they do cool stuff with it where it changes for the characters as they become like more mature. Most notably with Domon, and then Rain the couple times she gets in. Whereas the thing lowers on them and the skin tight suit gets applied, it like seems just so like stressful on your body and like just painful. And then eventually, they maybe went a little bit too far with it with Domon at a certain point where it looks like he's like having an orgasm or something as this thing goes on, and where he's got this very calm, pleasant smile on his face as this thing like envelops his body because he's found his Meikyo Shisui. He's tranquil and at peace with himself. Maybe a little bit too much. He's like
I just have to note that in the first version of that transformation sequence, whenever they play it, they show the shot of it going taut over his ass, and like they just show his like taut, muscled ass.
Yes,
and it really. I think it's funny that is the thing that gets by far most objectified on any body in this show. Because even when they put Rain in there, like it goes over her boobs, but they don't do anything like
especially
with that
compared with like if Eva had. Because Eva does some of this stuff with their plug suits, but but if they had the transformation sequence,
no, and I just think it's funny that like the super objectifying thing they do with the body in Gundam is Domon's ass in the first few episodes, because it is like that ass is taking up the whole frame, and it's like 3 seconds of animation.
Yeah, it's just nice, tight. Like he's the king of hearts, man. He's the greatest martial artist in the colonies. He's got to have a tight ass.
George Desand, Sir George Desand, who I think my favorite Gundam overall of the show might be the, it's the Tequila Gundam, but other than that, it's the Gundam Rose, which is, I just love, it's like a Napoleonic, he's got like a Napoleon tricorder hat Gundam, and he's got his fucking fencing sword, and I love it in the way I love Makuve's suit, the Gyan in the original Gundam.
Yeah.
It's just it's so clearly modeled on like a real world like outfit or piece of armor or something. I fucking love it.
Yeah, and I like they give him the rose bits, which I think like fits the character. I like the weird like it's got this weird like fake cloak thing on the Rose Gundam that looks very good. Yeah, it's just it is I think one of like the better design, because a lot of the designs in G Gundam I think are incredibly gaudy looking, and some of that works for the show in some ways maybe, but like most of these Gundams I would never want to buy a figure of, let's say, other than the Shining Gundam and God Gundam I think look great. The Master Gundam looks fucking awesome. But yeah, so George Sand, Takumi Yamazaki, not quite like the resume of a lot of the other voice actors, but has played lots of like main roles in big series and stuff like that. Just also like they really, it feels like they went out of their way to assemble a really strong core cast.
Yeah.
Because they got some pretty heavy hitters. And yeah, the thing I like about George is I think they do have some really good, clean, like, story arcs with him and, like, the idea of honor. And I think he has, honestly, what maybe is my favorite of the, like, final episodes where he fights Domon.
Yes,
like,
that
his
was
character
so good.
arc comes to a head. I think that's, like, the cleanest one of those where his journey from going someone who fights entirely for the honor of France, only owning up to that one Gundam rule, whichever one it was, that you can't dishonor the country that you're fighting for, and then him just stealing the Gundam Rose because he so desperately needs to fight for himself. I think that was like a really great episode. Also, one of the George Sand episodes is where I come in, a Gentle Chapman. So
yes, we'll get there.
And then our fourth one, and one that I went on a big journey with is Argo Gulski, who is voiced by Hidenari Ugaki. And for like the first few Argo episodes, I was like, there's something super familiar about this voice, but I can't quite place it. And I looked up who it was, and it's Majima from the Yakuza series.
Nice!
And obviously doing a very, very different performance, because Majima is this kind of like Joker-esque, like kind of psychopathic, wacky character with like a serious underside, but he projects that. So it's a lot of like him being kind of crazy sounding, and his like pitch is much higher. Argo is this like very taciturn, serious, deep voice character. And so a lot of like the distinctive things in Ugaki's voice that I can usually pick out to tell that it's him is hard to hear in the Argo voice. But as soon as I knew that, for the next like probably 5 or 6 appearances of the character, the entire time he was talking, it just sounded like Majima doing an impression of Kiryu. Like there's something about like him that's like, it's just, I could only picture Majima in the booth just going like, look at me, I'm big strong man. And like that's what the Argo performance sounds like. With that context, it so sounds like Majima making fun of this big stoic muscly man thing, which is exactly what Kiryu is. And it ruined maybe the middle section of that character's episodes for me before I could kind of get used to it again. Because it was so hard to break that mental impression I had as soon as I knew it was Majima. Because I could just hear it so clearly.
Which is a weird context, of course, because this was years before Yakuza was
Oh,
even
yes.
an
This is
idea.
like 10 years before Yakuza 1 comes out. Obviously, this is like way before, because that's his most well-known role now. But he plays lots of... He's most known, or like the main stuff he does is he plays lots of smaller roles. Like he's in a lot of stuff like Gintama or Pokemon and stuff like that, where he will just be like, they'll just bring him in if there's like, here's like 3 characters that only appear in this one episode, and you play all 3 of them and like just do a different voice for them. He's very good at that stuff. So I was actually really pleased because he usually doesn't get like major sustained roles in big long shows like this. And it's like, oh cool, this is Ugaki. I'll just have to get used to not thinking about Majima this whole time.
And I love Argo. Argo's got a great backstory where he is the Neo-Russia fighter, and in probably the most accurate depiction of any country on this show is Neo-Russia,
yes.
Because their whole thing is that so Argo was a former space pirate, and he and all of his men, all of his crew were arrested, and they're in a gulag, and he is taken out of the gulag because he's a good fighter, he's a good prison fighter, and they strap a bomb to his chest and put him in handcuffs, and he has his handler woman, Nastasha, not Natasha, Nastasha.
Yeah,
Nastasha, and she is his handler, and he is forced to fight, and if he wins the Gundam fight, they will free his companions. But so he always has the bomb and the handcuffs, and I will say, the last like 15 episodes, like I said, of G Gundam are just this rolling series of phenomenal payoffs, and one of my favorites is when Nastasha takes off the handcuffs and his men are there and gets off the bomb, and like Argo gets what he wants. because he's a great character and he fucking earns it.
Yes. Yeah. No. He's very fun, and that payoff, and I really like his relationship with Nastasia and the way they slowly come to trust each other. Because in many ways, the way they play his character arc is Argo is not the character that grows, it's her. He's kind of pretty much a rock. He stays the same.
Because we learn in the Chapman, or no, which episode is it? Who's
the Neo Canada one with
it's Andrew Graham.
Andrew
Graham. We learn that he was involved in this, what Andrew Graham thought was a murder. He was really trying to save her, and we learned that he's this pirate with a heart of gold who has a strong moral sense, and other people kind of misunderstand him. Yeah. So yes, Nastasia is the one who grows.
Yeah, but he's fun, and I do like the animation they use where the Bolt Gundam launches off this big metal ball on its side, and then he attaches the big chain to it and has
so
this
good.
That's very good. And his fight, I think he probably of the four have my favorite intro episode, the whole prison escape and the fight with Domon in the ice. That episode is really good. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we should talk about this next set of episodes. Not in super depth, but there's some characters and designs we should talk about. Starting with episode 7 is the episode where we meet Chico Rodriguez, and his sister is named, it's the same as the woman who plays Jane the Virgin. It's Gina Rodriguez. Her name is Gina Rodriguez, and I thought that was so funny because that's the name of the actress who is on that show and is in a lot of other stuff, obviously. But he is he's a fighter who has run away from his duty, which is kind of an interesting one. I actually like the story in this one a lot. But of course, the highlight of that episode is that Neo Mexico's suit is the Tequila Gundam, which is this big, very, very it's got every stereotypically Mexican thing you could throw at it. So it's got a multicolored poncho, and he's got a trident, and he's got a big sombrero.
Yeah. Oh
my god, the Tequila Gundam is amazing.
So one thing of note here is when the show came over to Toonami, they did change a number of the different names. Some for the God Gundam and Devil Gundam, because they had religious references, because America is America, they changed those. To their credit, Burning Gundam, which is what they changed God Gundam to, pretty fucking good name for that Gundam.
It is, although it's called G Gundam because that's the G Gundam.
Yes. Although they call it the G Gundam, I think, the first time they introduced it, and then they just call it the God Gundam for the rest of the show. But then they call the Devil Gundam Dark Gundam, and that's dumb.
Yeah.
But anyways, the Tequila Gundam they changed to Spike Gundam, which doesn't capture anything about how offensive that Gundam design is. Tequila Gundam is the icing on the cake of man, this is just okay then. Whew.
But I mean, is it?
Yes. Yeah, the answer to that question, John, the answer to the question you're asking is yes, it is. It is.
But
actually.
I mean, it is definitely an nth degree version of it, but they're all taking one kind of stupid, kind of trivial thing about that country's identity and making it the Gundam. Yeah. I mean, New Holland is just a windmill that can
That's
fight.
Hilarious. Because I feel that's not playing off of, strong cultural stereotypes outside of they have windmills in Holland. It's just silly.
Yes.
The Tequila Gundam, there's something about it and I look at it the way that it has a little piece that on the face that looks like a stereotypical Mexican mustache that it's just.
Yeah. I hope I'm not offending anyone by finding such joy in this, but it's just so over the top silly.
Yeah, it's very Street Fighter 2. We've taken one or two things about this country and sort of just amped it up to 11 to make this character.
Yeah. No, and certainly there are some that you would say the Rose Gundam is it's stereotypical, but it's more of France's sense of honor and dignity. Yeah. Whereas it's a Tequila Gundam. It's like if they had done Russian, it was the Vodka Gundam.
Exactly.
And it just had a bottle in its hand at all times.
Neo Ireland has the Guinness Gundam, right? There's something about it there, maybe this type of alcohol is not the thing you want to highlight so much that it literally becomes the name of the fucking Gundam.
But I still love it so much. It's so stupid. Okay, then you have an episode called Revenge of the Space Police, which is a great fucking name for an episode. Yeah. But that's the Andrew Graham episode with Neo Canada's Lumber Gundam.
Lumber Gundam.
which is very good.
I'll take the Lumber Gundam. I'm fine with that. And then Andrew Graham is a like, you know, he's out in the woods with a big fucking beard, just like chopping trees down.
And I want to actually talk about this because so his whole thing is that his wife died. He thinks Argo killed her. Argo was really trying to save her in this like kind of attack gone wrong. And there's a sequel to this episode later during the Neo Hong Kong tournament with them that is really good. Where like there's the first one where they fight, and then there's another one where he has to tag team with Argo, and he winds up sacrificing himself to save Argo. I think Andrew Graham, he's got like those 3 episodes, but he's got a really good arc with Argo, and I think it's one of the reasons why Argo is one of my favorite characters. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Interestingly enough, I don't entirely know the reason why they did this, but they did change the Lumber Gundam's name to the Grizzly Gundam.
They did?
Yes.
That's too bad. Lumber Gundam is so good.
Yeah. And it makes, I mean, the thing has like 2 giant axes on each arm.
Yeah.
Like it's clearly supposed to be like I'm chopping down trees with my giant Gundam.
Yeah.
I mean, you could also make a Neo Canada Grizzly Gundam. It would have to look like a big grizzly bear.
Yeah. Would the Tequila Gundam equivalent of this have been the Maple Gundam?
Sure, yes. I think it's hard to find like a truly like negative stereotype for Canada because they're just, you know, they're not quite remarkable.
A Gundam that just says I'm sorry every time it throws a punch.
Yeah, exactly. The you know, I would have also gone for a Mountie Gundam, would have been pretty nice.
We have other Gundams on horses though, so
yes.
We do get that. Okay, then Sean, we get the episode which you co-star in.
Yes.
Which is
Powerful Enemy, Chapman's Heroic Challenge.
Neo England's Gentle Chapman. This is actually a really great episode. Like, we're going to laugh because they keep saying Chopperman every few seconds, and that made me laugh because Chapman isn't a name I hear in fiction much.
Yeah, and then, you know, you maybe thought after this episode that it was over, and then they bring him back for the second half of the show, even more powerful than before. And I'm like a cool zombie assassin.
Yes. I will say, Sean, I tried to fit this on the logo for this episode where it says Jonathan Lack and Sean Chapman. I was going to write Sean Gentle Chapman, and it didn't quite fit. But yeah, I mean, I could go back and try to see if I can make it work, but it's definitely funny. But that's a really good episode because it's about this guy who has like won a bunch of Gundam fights and he's failing in his health is failing, and so his wife is giving him like fucking steroids, and then he winds up dying at the end in battle. That's actually a really good episode.
Yeah, I will say that, like, I do think these episodes are pretty good on their own, but I think this is one of the weaker periods to me, just in the sense of like. I feel like the show loses something by having, like, revealing so much about the mystery of Kyoji and then kind of going back to business as usual afterwards. There's, like, I think a pacing hitch here.
I can understand that.
Episode's a little bit for me.
Because the next 2 I don't even remember very well. You have the Neo Egypt one, and you have the, I don't even remember. It's one with like Rain's friend who is named Saite, who has the DG cells in his body. It doesn't really feel like we get back to forward momentum until episode 12, which is when we meet Toho Fuhai.
Yes.
So yeah. So should we just talk about Toho Fuhai?
Because the Pharaoh Gundam one, that's the Sai Sai Shi, and it's like a ghost mummy Gundam, but it's actually the DG cells. Here's like part of like with the Devil Gundam stuff that I do love is whenever they talk about the DG Saibo meaning cell in Japanese, is a lot of Godzilla movies from this period, from the mid-90s, are all about scientists doing some experiment with G cells or G Saibo. And creating some sort of monster like Destroya or Biolante that way. And some of those plots are very much like you just took like a rejected Godzilla movie script and cut it down a bit and made a Gundam episode out of it with, instead of it being G cells, it's DG cells. And I like that.
Very good. So episode 12 is when we get the start of this arc that's in Shinjuku, which I think is a really good arc.
Yeah.
It goes through like it's like 5 episodes here. Mm-hmm. And it starts with you meet Master Asia, Toho Fuhai, and at first we think he's a good guy, and Domon helps him do this like big fight against all the like hordes of the like fighters that the
Dark Army.
The Dark Army, which is that's actually some of the best visuals in the whole show, because clearly here they're able to cut down on the backgrounds a little bit and do a lot more front kind of cellular animation. I got the word cell in my head because of that, but it's a different kind of cell, CEL, and there's some really cool stuff with that. And then it's a couple episodes later when you find out Master Asia has been working with the Devil Gundam and is oh my god, he's a bad guy.
Oh no.
But Sean, should we take a pause here and talk about the best character on this show?
Yes, absolutely.
One of the best characters in Gundam. Mm-hmm. Maybe just one of the best characters, period. That is Master Asia, Toho Fuhai, the undefeated of the East.
Yep.
The East is burning red. He is so good.
Yes.
Amazing. I love this character. Tell me about him.
So yeah, I mean, you were 100% right. I'm glad that you're in the same place as me because I have long held that Master Asia is the best character in Mobile Fighter G Gundam. He is the fucking best. And he is like, he's like the Gundam character that stumbled into the show in some ways, in that like all of the environmental stuff, which is the most Gundam-esque thematic material of the show, is all kind of filtered through Master Asia. But then he's the only character that I would consider like psychologically complex. Like everybody else is pretty straightforward and clear, like what their deal is. And Master Asia is like, he's the closest thing that this show has to a Char clone, right? Like he's this like character that is a villain, but like seems to have like a weird, complicated motive, and you're kind of on his side sometimes, kind of not on his side other times.
He keeps you guessing until kind of the end of his arc on the show. And
his arc is so good, and it's especially really satisfying on a rewatch because it's so clear immediately that they knew exactly what the full thing they were going to do with this character was, because he's playing up the role of the villain in so many ways, because his ultimate objective is something that's pretty, like, awful on this massive scale, that he wants to sort of help the Devil Gundam erase humanity from the planet. But he's doing that for noble reasons. And, it's basically what Char is trying to do, just only with a giant, weird, like, Lovecraftian horror instead of just a meteor. Char's a little bit more straightforward with his planning than Master Asia is. But so Master Asia comes to this conclusion that the Earth needs to be cleansed because, fair enough, we're just kind of having a giant, fucked up, giant robot fighting tournament on the Earth every 4 years and not really caring whether it happens in massive populated cities or not. And so cities are just getting destroyed and decayed and stuff from the consequences of the Gundam fight. And so he's fallen into despair because of that and wants to fix it and help the Devil Gundam destroy humanity, at least on Earth. Not all of humanity, just the people on Earth, and like keep humanity away from Earth so that Earth can be saved.
Yeah, his idea is that the Devil Gundam would become like the guardian of Earth.
Yeah.
And anytime anyone tried to come down, it would have the power to stop them.
Exactly. And I think a key thing for him is that he thinks the last time he sees Domon's going off to the colony to go be with his family again. Master Asia has passed on the crest of the King of Hearts. He has like taken off the mantle of the man who has to like protect the Earth Sphere and all this stuff as a member of the Shuffle Alliance, and he has named his successor. So he's basically on like this like weird suicide mission to help the Devil Gundam, thinking that Domon will be out in space to take care of the next generation, not knowing that Domon gets wrapped into the whole Gundam fight and is, so when he meets Domon in Shinjuku, all Master Asia's plans get turned on their head. Which is something, obviously, the first time you're watching it through, you don't know any of that stuff. It gets revealed to you later. But all the hints of, like, the elements of that having happened to Master Asia are there in his interactions with Domon and, like, the little bits of scheming he does. And it's his relationship with Domon and both his need to have Domon come over to Master Asia's side, but also, like, having to kind of help Domon grow to be his successor at the same time. And this like kind of conflicted relationship he has is so potent, and it's so and Domon's side of it also, that Domon doesn't know how to treat Master Asia, whether to treat him as his like master or as his foe. It's just, I mean, again, it's the melodrama of the show.
It gives him his like best high melodrama moments.
Exactly. Because it's the whole, there's a really great kind of like linguistic thing that happens here that's a little bit hard for the show to translate, specifically because the character's name is Master Asia. Which is just, that's not supposed to, I guess, be his actual name. I think he has, like, an actual name the show never tells you. I think one of the manga tells you what it is or something, but he's got basically, he's a man with a lot of different titles. He's Master Asia, he's Toho Fuhai, the undefeated in the East, he's the King of Hearts, or the former King of Hearts. But basically, they do this dynamic with Domon and Master Asia, where once Master Asia reveals that, I'm not actually working with you to try to save Shinjuku. I'm actually using this to like lure Gundam fighters here and then use them to make the Devil Gundam stronger. And from this day forward, I cut my tie of mastering people with you forever. And from that point, Domon keeps on waffling between how to address Master Asia, either as Shisho, which means master, effectively like martial arts master, like that kind of specific. Comes from Shifu, which is the Chinese word for master in that context. and then calling him Toho Fuhai, which is, means undefeated in the East, and it's one of Master Asia's many titles. And I love every time when Domon's like very mad at Master Asia, he's like, Toho Fuhai, I'm going to defeat you, all this stuff. And then something else will be happening, and he'll just kind of like distractedly call him Shisho again. And then he like realizes what he says and has to correct himself in like the struggle that Domon has with like how to understand the role that Master Asia plays in his life. And it's made a little bit complicated by the translation for the word master being master.
Yeah.
And his name being Master Asia. And I think the translators usually do a pretty good job of trying to handle it. But it's like a weird juggling act of how do you translate this character dynamic. That's pretty important for how the Domon's like relationship with Master Asia works.
Yeah, you don't have to speak a lot of Japanese to get it. I got it 100%. I mean, I know all those. I happen to just know all those words.
Yeah.
But like, even if you didn't, you'd pick up on it pretty fast. Like what Shisho is, Toho Fuhai. If you do, he says it so much that if you don't learn those words, you're an idiot.
Yeah, you're just not listening to it.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, can I give a little bit of backstory here too? Because the name and kind of some of the things about the character come from Chinese like wuxia novels.
Yeah.
And specifically, they were influenced by a series of movies that were popular at the time this was made, called the Swordsman trilogy. The first of which, the Swordsman 1, was the last movie made by King Hu, who we love from Touch of Zen and Dragon Inn and stuff like that. Although he left production partway through, and then it was finished by other directors, including Tsui Hark. Tsui Hark produced this whole series. But the second movie, Swordsman 2, is where you meet the character who in the novel... God, what's the wuxia book that's based on? Let me look that up really quick. But you get this character who's played in the movie by Bridget Lin in one of her most famous performances. It's from a Louis Cha novel called The Smiling Proud Wanderer, and that's a really famous wuxia novel. And there's a character in there named Dongfang Bubai, who is also known as Invincible Asia. And when that is translated into Japanese and this movie comes to Japan, they name the movie after that character, and the Japanese words for that are Toho Fuhai.
Yeah.
So Swordsman 2 in Japanese is just called Toho Fuhai. And that Bridget Lin character is sort of an inspiration. Some of the like fighting techniques he uses are very much pulled from, like, they're very King Hu style. They're very like Tsui Hark, like kind of that school of wuxia action. And the whole thing that part of his creed, the East is burning red.
Yeah.
That happens to be the title of the third Swordsman movie. So, like, all of these, like, clearly Imagawa just liked those movies as they were coming out. They're kind of hard to find today. I did find Swordsman 2 and watched a little bit of that last night. It's got Jet Li in it as well.
Oh, cool.
It's okay. I need to, like, get into it more. I think I would need to see the first one because they recast everyone, but I do think there is continuity in them. They're kind of like, almost think of them more like Jackie Chan style wuxia movies because they're very comedic. Jet Li's character, has his fucking gourd full of wine that he's constantly drinking from and stuff. And they find a scorpion and he puts the scorpion in the wine because it'll give it better body. Anyway.
Honestly, I'm pretty surprised that they didn't have an episode where Master Asia uses the drunken fist.
Yeah.
That seems like they should have. That maybe they did plan on it, and that would have been episode 50 and it got cut.
Yeah. But anyway, no, Master Asia. Can you tell us about who voiced him? Because you were telling
Yes. Because he's from because you had Hochu Otsuka, who's from like basically a generation above Tomikaze Seki and the other ones who were playing the main Shovel Alliance guys, and then the voice actor for Master Asia, who is Yosuke Akimoto, who he also plays Stalker. I don't know if you noticed that.
I did not notice that.
Same guy.
He's a very versatile guy. Those two don't sound the same. Like now you say it, I can kind of hear it, but they're
Yeah, so he's from like even the generation before. He was born in the 40s. So he's up there. But yeah, I mean, he's been in a shit ton of stuff. I don't know if he's, when I looked at it, I don't know if he was anything in anything that I had seen that like popped out to me, but it's like, it's a lot of stuff. He's Dr. Fuji in Pokemon, the first movie.
Interesting.
Yeah, so he's he's in just a bunch of stuff. Oh, he's, I think he's the Raikage in Naruto, maybe. Yeah, so he's in a bunch of stuff. He's in a lot of Lupin stuff. So, like, a lot of from that, like, kind of earlier generation, he's just, like, all over the place.
And it's a great performance. Yes. Like, he so walks that line between being a mustache-twirling villain who enjoys being evil, which he absolutely does at times. Like, he relishes the role of, like, kind of mocking Domon and, like, needling him and stuff.
Baka deshiga! Yeah.
But he also plays, like, you can tell there's, like, he doesn't really want to kill Domon at any point in the show, I don't think. And, like, he has genuine affection. And when he has to change to being, like, the noble warrior, or especially, like, in his last episode when he dies, I mean, he is so fucking good.
Yes.
It is truly, I think he's up there with Char or Haman Karn or Amuro. Like, name your favorite Gundam characters. He's one of them.
Yeah, and he and his relationship with Domon is my favorite part of the show. And it's where, like, I think the Shinjuku section is one of the best parts of the show because it focuses in on that. And I think the moment where Domon sees Master Asia, because they kind of set that character up in episode 6, because they tell you, and you get like a brief image of it, that it's like, oh, Domon trained with Master Asia on Earth for so much time, and then he came back, and the day that he came back was also the day that all this shit happened. And so you know that this Master Asia character is out there from episode 6, but then you don't actually meet him until episode 12. And so that moment where Domon sees Master Asia, this is like one scene that's like a whole like list of scenes or series of scenes where we see these kinds of moments through Rain's eyes and her looking at Domon, having this like these legitimate moments of like levity with Master Asia in a way that we have not seen him have for the whole show up to this point. That is like, you know, the implications is like Rain, it's the kind of thing that like Rain wants to be able to have Domon be happy, but she doesn't know how to be that person for him, and so she sees this happening with Master Asia. Again, very soap opera kind of framing that they use for those sequences, but it is like really striking when you have Domon's just like laughing, and Tomokazu Seki does such a good job of revealing, I think, that a lot of the Domon we've seen up till now has been an affectation for him. That's like the like tough kind of growly voice that he has and the shoutiness he has is a little bit of a put on. That like Domon, you know, he's the oldest Gundam protagonist we've had so far, but he's still young. He's 20 years old. And most of that 20 years has been spent training in the wilderness with Master Asia. He does know, you know, he hasn't had any romantic relationships with anyone else. He hasn't had like that kind of life experience. So he's still like so kind of naive in so many ways. And so seeing that we're like back and forth with Master Asia and setting up the, you know, the East is burning red and like the whole chant they do in the posing, which then, you know, they rip your fucking heart out on Master Asia's death scene using that same stuff. Like it's set up here as like this, the first moment of true happiness that Domon has had in the whole show up to this point. Which then again, you know, a couple episodes later, they then rip his heart out, saying like, and no, Master Asia's actually been evil, and he's working with the Devil Gundam and Kyoji, quote unquote Kyoji, the whole time. And you now have to fight your only master and the only person in the world that can still make you happy, Domon. Great, go for it, buddy.
No, I mean, this is when they really start cooking with gasoline, I think, is Shinjuku. And you start seeing, like, how all these threads can come together. Because this is also where we should say you have all of the 4 other characters, Argo, George, Saichi, and Shibide Crockett, come back having been taken over by the Devil Gundam. He has to save them, and then you meet the original Shuffle Alliance, who come to Earth and have a memorable episode, and they wind up dying to fight the Devil Gundam, and then all those characters get the... I mean, Domon already has the King of Hearts crests, but the other characters get it, and this is when they become the Shuffle Alliance. So there's a ton of big events here. This is also, at the end of the Shinjuku section, is when we meet Schwarzbruder, the Neo-Germany fighter, who is a ninja somehow.
Yes, piloting the Gundam Spiegel.
Which is great.
Yes.
Schwarzbruder, he's so great.
Yeah, I mean, he's just a man wearing a skin-tight ninja-style outfit that is colored after the German flag, who just appears mysteriously to give Domon some, like, advice and help him on his path, and then Domon never listens because Domon's just, like, angry. And just, you know, he wants to just use that super mode and defeat the Devil Gundam, even though he's too naive to actually be able to pull it off.
Schwarzbruder is such a great character, especially I think in this and the Guyana Highlands section, where he kind of replaces Master Asia as that, the master role. He's like the guy mentoring Domon. And he's just doing his crazy ninja shit, like coming out of shadows, or you thought there was a tree there, but it's really Schwartz, or he rises out of the water, and just all these crazy fucking things he does. I love Schwarzbruder. And how quickly did you predict it would be his brother?
Oh, like immediately.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same voice actor also. That's just like he's just talking with a mask over his face. So if you paid attention to the couple times you hear Kyoji's voice before. Or after the sequence, you know pretty quickly. Yeah. And then at the like midpoint of the show, they very heavily lay it on. Yes. Like if they make the right choice to not properly reveal it until it is revealed to one of our main characters. So it's like only implied that like Master Asia finds out it's him, but yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it's one where, like, it's not, when you finally learn it, it's not meant to be like this earth-shattering reveal.
Yeah, not to the audience. It's meant to be an earth-shattering reveal to Domon and Rain. Yeah.
It's one of the ways I think this show handles exposition and mystery really masterfully.
Yeah.
Like, it knows what it's doing. So after that, we get the section in the Guiana Highlands. I think this section is a little too long.
Yes.
Because the early part of it has a lot where it goes through like an episode with each of the 4 Shuffle Alliance characters. And those are kind of, I think, the weakest section for those characters, because there's just not a lot to do with them.
Yeah, and this is also where Domon is very much just going in circles, where he's like relearning the same, and this like is true from here to like the mid-climax, where he's just kind of relearning the same lesson over and over and over and over again, and like make Yoshi stuff. It's like, we get it. Like, he needs to calm down and become more tranquil and like focus and let go of his anger.
Because he goes to the Guiana Highlands with the sword that Schwartz gives him, because Schwartz gives him this rusted-ass old katana that he has been able to cut through a tree with, and he's like, Domon, you will be ready to fight the Devil Gundam when you can do the same thing. And so he has that sword for the rest of the show, which I love. But that is his goal in the Guiana Highlands. But you're right, he's in kind of a holding pattern, and all the other characters, some of them are okay. Like, I think the episode with Chibude where his girls steal the gun, all that's actually really fun. They're not bad, but it does feel like a little stretched out, although the last couple Guiana Highlands episodes are fan-fucking-tastic.
Yes, yeah, once everything is in place and they actually get to commit to something, the problem is like it just takes them so long to do that. Because that's where then like just everything just goes fucking crazy. And like if they had ended the show there, it's like, well, I guess it's actually we didn't see what happened at the end of the Gundam fight, but holy shit. But it's like, you have a big last stand with all the Shuffle Alliance members fighting against the Death Army coming in and attacking them. Domon masters the super mode and all that stuff, and goes to fight Master Asia, but like, Schwartz Bruder's in the mix. There's maybe one too many times where like Domon's still on the like, I just have to get fucking pissed, and if I get fucking pissed, then I get the angry super mode and I'll win, and Schwartz Bruder's like, you idiot. And this is like the 30th fucking time I've told you how many times you have to get your goddamn ass kicked before you calm the fuck down. Oh my god, Domon.
But I do love seeing, this is the first time the Shuffle Alliance comes together as a team, and they have this whole kind of Seven Samurai-esque episode where they have to like plan out how they're going to get out of the valley, and he's even got, I think, like the Seven Samurai style like map where they're planning their battle, and then Domon stays behind to fight Master Asia and the Devil Gundam, and it's so good. It really does. This show really feels like a Season 1, Season 2 anime, because episode 24 is where we get the God Gundam. It's where he masters the technique, where he finally does the move where he like puts his fingers in his hand and he goes Super Saiyan, basically. He, kind of like Ultra Instinct in Dragon Ball.
It's very much, it's the same martial arts concept.
Right. Yeah. And he's able to defeat everything and then get to Hong Kong. And you're right. It feels like the show, if it ended there, it would kind of suck, but you'd also be like, well, I got enough of a resolution. Like, everyone came together, they fought, Domon learned something, they defeated the Devil Gundam, great. And then it's very much, we kind of start up again. And so the next section in Neo Hong Kong is slower. Not in a bad way, though. It's kind of like starting up again, Yeah,
because, I mean, they go so far as, like, the Shining Gundam is destroyed, Master Asia is, as far as totally defeated until he reappears like 2 episodes later. But like in that like desperate battle between Domon and Master Asia is so good. And there's that moment. This is like one moment where they just do such a good job with that Master Asia character, where he's where he almost basically reveals what his actual motivation is, because Domon says something of like, you just want to use the Devil Gundam to take over the world, like you're just a villain. And then Master Asia's, starts out on like a thing where he is like, that's not it at all. But he kind of stops himself and is just like, no, fine. Like, I'm a villain. We'll just fight. And they kind of, you get enough hints, and there's like enough gaps and stuff that Master Asia says. There's a similar moment where when he sees the Shuffle Alliance sacrifice themselves, that you can see this line that he says is either him being like, what are you doing? Why are you sacrificing yourselves? As him being afraid because it's going to be something that stops him, versus why are you doing? Why are you sacrificing yourselves? Because he's concerned, because they're his friends that he's had for decades. And they do a good job in that climax fight with his duel against Domon. He says a bunch of stuff that like Domon just identifies as like, you're just a crazy villain, and the audience, if you're paying attention, it's like there's more going on here. He's saying something else that you're not picking up yet because you don't have the context.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so satisfying. I also think it's interesting that this show is obviously very different than the vast majority of Gundam shows. structurally and everything.
Yeah.
It does borrow one major structural thing, which is that the protagonist starts in one Gundam,
Yes.
and at the midway point gets another. And I think this show does it as well as any Gundam show.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah, the Shining Gundam getting destroyed with like the fucking Master Gundam's hand through its chest, and then the G Gundam coming down like in this like weird rose pod thing. And I do love the like heartful send-off that Domon gives the Shining Gundam, where it's like, Shining Gundam, you and I have been through so many battles over the course of this past year, and that's where you're like, it's been a fucking year? Holy shit. It's like, you know, you have to fight with me one last time, my old friend. And then there's a couple times of him just like tearfully remembering the Shining Gundam that I like a lot.
Yeah, it's great. And I think it helps that the Shining Gundam itself makes such an impact. Like,
Yeah.
this is a problem I think, for instance, Victory Gundam ran into, where his first Gundam that he's in is like, it's fine, but it's the what do they call the second Gundam? Just the Mark II?
The V2 Gundam.
Yeah, the V2 Gundam is like such a great one that like it so overshadows. But the Shining Gundam and the God Gundam are both awesome.
Yeah.
And the God Gundam feels like a real evolution of the Shining Gundam.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's really cool. We do have I think they do it creatively, a semi-recap episode at 25 where you have all of the different countries' Gundams like come into Neo Hong Kong, and we get little recaps about some of the different characters, but we also get to meet all the other Gundams from all over the world. Like, I think probably what is the most offensive one is the Zebra Gundam from Neo Kenya.
Yeah. That was not great.
But you also get Neo Holland, and you get the Windmill Gundam, you get the Viking Gundam, you get
the Zeus Gundam.
Yep.
Yeah, from Neo Greece.
Neo Greece. Yeah, which is totally what Greece would do that.
Yes, that one's pretty cool. He's like on a chariot. And then that's also where Master Asia reappears at the end of the episode. And Domon has his fun declaration that kind of fucks him over a little bit, because now everyone's pissed off at him, where he's like, I'm going to win every single fight and come up through the tournament and defeat you. And this is where we have to talk about, I guess, the structure of the Neo Hong Kong tournament, because this is where I do like the second half of the show more, but it runs into this thing where you realize, like, well, technically this entire show is a giant tournament. Like, even the first half, it just isn't as, like, they just don't have a single ring that they're fighting in, like in the Hong Kong section. It is not a tournament arc. It's not like the Tenkaichi Budokai in that sense. It's not like, if you watch the sports anime, or eventually we'll get to Gundam Build Fighters and we'll talk about a proper tournament arc in a Gundam show, or like the Dark Tournament from Yu Yu Hakusho, which I think is probably the best example of this. One part of like what makes a tournament arc satisfying is the procedural quality of walking through, here's how the tournament functions, and seeing the matchups, and having to, like, there's a drama to having to commit to, Krillin has to fight these characters, Goku has to fight these characters, and if Krillin loses, that means you don't get the Goku-Krillin fight, right? Like, you set up these different matchups, and you have to commit to, if someone loses, they're out. And they sort of just create these rules for the final tournament here, where Wong comes out and he gives 3 additional final tournament rules. Really only one of these rules to actually manifest in any meaningful way, which is final tournament additional rules number 1. Unlimited repairs, improvements, and substitutions are acceptable during the final tournament, which basically means as long as you can repair your Gundam, you can still fight in the tournament. And what that means in terms of who gets to go to the Battle Royale that finishes the fight, which they set up in this episode, they say, and then the last thing will be the last Gundam standing or whatever will fight in a Battle Royale on that island over there, and that's where we'll fight Master Asia, because he gets to skip the prelims because he's won the last tournament. But there's no sense of, like, points or scoring or, like, what conditions must be fulfilled.
My sense, because they start saying later on that, like, they've had enough wins or something, is that this is more like the World Cup than it is a tournament, where it's like, you could lose your last match before the World Cup and still go to the World Cup, right?
Yeah.
Because it's about how many points you've accumulated. And that seems to be what it is, but they never, like, lay it out and show us the scoreboard.
They never manifest that for the audience. And I think part of that is, like, it feels like they, like, leave themselves this wiggle room to have whatever matchups they want, have whatever outcomes they want, without ever having that to affect the logistics of how the tournament actually functions. And, like, that's a bit of a bummer, and I think it does hurt the tournament in places, and some, like, the weaker episodes could have been strengthened up by having, like, that additional procedural aspect. I do want to then say also the other two rules that Wang Yunfat gives the tournament, which is 2, victory may be attained through any means, including targeting the cockpit, which I don't think ever actually straight up comes up. I mean, because any time that basically comes up is also when, like, the evil Gundams create, like, the fog screen or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh no, George is going to die. But they don't usually, like, actually, like, play with that much. And then the third one, which this isn't even a rule, but I love that he adds this. And they get a good graphic of a Gundam standing on top of a pile of Gundams that goes along with this, that they show every single time they say this, which is the final winner of the Battle Royale will be awarded the title Gundam of Gundams. Which is not a rule, but that is pretty cool. I like it.
It's so good. I love every time they say Gundam za Gundam zu.
Yeah.
It's great. All right. Yeah, and so then we have the first couple ones are Domon matches where he fights Zeus Gundam. That's a pretty good one.
Yeah.
And then he fights. Okay, we need another racist check here.
Oh, this is the Neo India one is by far the most racist.
Yes,
it is upsetting.
Yeah, the Cobra Gundam, because this is the only one where it also feels like they're selling the character out for it,
and the human character feels.
Yes.
Like he has been turned into a racist caricature,
yes.
Not just the Gundam.
That's what I mean, yeah. Because
yes.
like I said with the Tequila Gundam, say what you will about the Tequila Gundam, Chico Rodriguez, his story's really good. That's
yes.
a good episode. He's a solid character. But like, yeah, he is a snake charmer, like sneak who is cheating and doing
his like skin has like an uncomfortable green pallor to it. Like there's just, and I've seen other characters in other Japanese media that have the same kind of physical qualities to him that like is very much like this is no bueno. This is a very racist like other Asian stereotype that Japan has. This is the one that's like straight up nope.
Yeah.
There's no excuses for Cobra Gundam and the Neo India pilot.
We never really see enough of the Neo Kenya Zebra Gundam to know how that would have shaped out.
No,
it sounds kind of bad on the surface, but you could also make that work.
I mean, yeah, it's in like the background of a couple of like that's what an example of a Gundam that exists to get like jobbed out to some random other fight like Sai she's going to fight the Mermaid Gundam,
right?
And it defeated the Kenya Gundam here. Yeah.
I also just think that Cobra Gundam episode isn't very good.
Mm-hmm.
I do think the first part of the tournament arc is kind of slow for all the reasons you were talking about. Some of it works for me, some of it doesn't. It's really when but there's some good ones scattered through here. So let's just talk. Then we have there's the assassin one. That one's kind of cool.
Yes, that's the one with the Zatoichi guy. Yeah, who's like a blind assassin with like a sword, and he's got.
I like that one.
Yeah, that guy's fun. He comes back at the end in a fun way.
Yes. Yes, he does. You have the Sai Shi in Love episode, which is a really good Sai Shi episode, where he is fighting the Mermaid Gundam, and it's the pilot's sister, Cecil, and they're kind of, without knowing who each other is, they're going on little dates, and you get that animation that they keep doing of Sai Shi making fried rice.
Yes.
It looks really good. It's very appetizing fried rice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's another good, like, soap opera-y kind of episode. I think that's part of where, like, the previous episodes don't work that well, because the show thinks it's like a fight show.
Yeah.
And I know that it's Mobile Fighter G Gundam. It's not a fight show. Like, if it was a fight show, the fights would be good. It's not a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, like, or something like that, where each episode you have a fight, the episode is centered around the fight, and the fight is just, like, amazing and has all this, like, cool, like, the dynamics of the fight are really creative. What makes Mobile Fighter G Gundam really good is when you have fun melodrama that the characters get to engage with, and having Sai Shi, this is classic. It's like he's in love with this lady, but then he finds out that, if I win this fight, maybe it'll make her sad and she'll have to go way back to Neo, wherever Mermaid Gundam is from. I don't even remember. Wherever mermaids are from, I guess. There's a good character, like, drama there for Sai Shi to engage with. And that episode also then has a lot of what is some of my favorite stuff in Neo Hong Kong, which is just the characters walking around Neo Hong Kong, and there's a lot of good, like, old anime style, like, very impressionistic city backgrounds with, like, big bloomed color lights and stuff like that. It's a lot of, like, the same kind of aesthetic you got when you get the section of Mobile Suit Gundam where Amuro meets his father again in that colony, and they're, like, driving around, and there's, like, convenience stores and stuff, and it's that very, like, interesting city backgrounds that don't have to put a lot of detail in, but evoke being in this, like, big bustling city. And this is also where you get a lot of the great Chinese language insert songs in this section that are so good.
Yes.
And really sell, like, the culture and community of Neo Hong Kong. because this is the longest we spend in one setting by far in the whole show.
Yeah.
You spend like 5 or 6 episodes in Shinjuku, 5 or 6 episodes in Guiana Highlands. It's like 25 episodes in Neo Hong Kong, and they really make it feel like a place that has people living in it, and that's great.
Oh, absolutely. And you meet characters like, so a great little detail is on the night they get there, Domon doesn't want to stay in the fancy hotel.
Yeah.
So he goes out looking for a place to stay, and he meets the old fisherman who lives on the boat with like his grandkids.
Yeah.
And he winds up staying with them, and they become part of like the supporting cast, and I love those characters. And he has the whole thing about the wandering bug or whatever
Yes.
it's called. There's this like allegory that Domon uses to win the day. I really love those characters and that aspect.
Yeah, and like anytime they get some of that, and I think there's a lot of that in that Sai Shi episode that like really grounds the
Yes.
setting and the characters in Neo Hong Kong, I think it works really well.
Episode 30 is when we meet our final main character,
Yes.
which is Alan B. Beardsley.
The best name in
In G-
Mobile Fighter G Gundam.
Yep.
Alan B. Beardsley.
Worthy of Tomino.
Yes, it is so good. Because was she like Neo Sweden? I think.
Yes, because her Gundam is the Nobel Gundam.
Yes, that's right. It's the Nobel Gundam, which I had for the longest time in my memory. I thought it was the Noble Gundam, and I think maybe the first time I watched it, maybe like the subtitles I were using translated it as Noble. But no, it is the Nobel Gundam because the Nobel
Yes.
Prize is from Sweden. And for whatever reason, the Nobel Gundam looks like Sailor Jupiter from Sailor Moon.
But it's awesome. It's a great
great.
Gundam. It's got like fucking metal hair. It's
Yes, and it has like a sailor, like a Japanese school sailor outfit,
Yes.
not an actual sailor outfit.
Yeah.
And yeah, Alan B. Beardsley is great. And this is where I think the tournament arc kind of fully manifests as itself. Is when like because it brings back the Domo and Rain relationship. As it gives like like Alan B. is obviously exists to create a love triangle between Domo and Rain and Alan B. Beardsley. And that like kind of brings Rain back because she in her relationship with Domon was just sort of like kind of in the wind because there has that big culminating moment in the big climax at the end of the first half of the show where it feels like they like connect psychically with each other through the brain waves and all that shit.
It has one of my favorite shots where it's their two faces coming together, and then it cuts to the two Gundam faces,
Yes.
and it has two Gundams look like they're falling in love.
Yeah, like two Gundams are about to start making out.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I wonder how that would work. It's like, what if Domon and Rain psychically kiss with each other? What do the Gundams look like they're doing? But after that point, for the next couple of episodes, it's just kind of like standard Rain Domon material, and it doesn't feel like anything. There's no pressure on the relationship. So having Alan B here, who she's obviously falls in love with Domon immediately, I think it's pretty clear that Domon just thinks of her as like a really good friend.
Yeah, he really respects her as a fighter. They love like practicing together and everything.
Yeah, and she's just such a fun character. But Rain obviously like misinterprets what the relationship is because it's a soap opera. And like that adds a really crucial element that I think up until this point is kind of missing. And that is one of the main things, one of the main threads that I think makes this whole second half of the show work so well. Is both, I just think Alan B is such a fun character.
Yes.
It's a great performance. It's a great character design. With her fucking like gloves. Like she looks like a human, like an anthropomorphized Sonic character that doesn't exist. So, like her big gloves, her little like jacket and blue hair. Right, like there's something about the character.
I hadn't thought of. She kind of looks like Hatsune Miku wearing the Sonic pajamas.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. It's just like this. Her character pops really well, and then her character colors are like pink and blue, which are also Rain's colors, but they're like inverse in terms of primacy. So it's like they do a lot of fun stuff with their characters. And then anytime she just gets to train with Domon, and like Domon comes up with a big like the solution for the fight that he's gonna have with her, those moments are all so good. And I also have a personal affection for Alan B. Beardsley because when I played XCOM 2 several years ago in like 2016, that was shortly after my big Gundam marathon. And so I named all my characters in XCOM after Gundam characters because it was like, I want to custom name all these characters. Was a great repertoire of fantastic names I can just dip into off the top of my head. Gundam names, and one of the first characters I named was a female fighter named Alan B. Beardsley, who's like an assault character. So she's like the Berserker Gundam, and she carried me through. Alan B. was there on like mission 1. She's there on the last mission. I think she's the only character I had in XCOM 2 that survived the whole game. And
Nice.
Thank you, Alan B. Beardsley, for that.
Episode 31 is the clown episode.
Yes.
And I just want to read the Wikipedia summary of episode 31 because it is such a great 3-sentence summary. Shibade lost his mother to a group of terrorist clowns and since then has been afraid of them. When his next opponent is Jester Gundam, who copies everyone's moves, it looks like Chibide will lose fairly quickly. However, with the song from his mother sung by his crew, he defeats the Mad Clown. This is the thinnest, dumbest thing the show ever does narratively.
Yeah.
But it being Chibide kind of makes it work.
Yeah, there's something that, like, he's such a ridiculous character. Again, his name is Chibide Crockett, and he pilots the Maxter Gundam that is the cross between a boxer and a football man. He is the only person that could fight the clown.
He runs around yelling, "Goddamn" and "Jesus."
Goddamn, Jesus! I'm the champ! Yeah, that's like, he has a number of English language catchphrases. Yeah, it's like, I'm not going to say it's a good episode necessarily. Like, it is definitely like one that, like, it feels like they just didn't have the time to give it the love and care that other episodes got, so it just sort of is, like, it is like that. Those 3 sentences are exactly what that episode is. There's nothing more to that episode. You could read those 3 sentences, watch the next episode, and have missed nothing with that character, right?
I mean, you might be a little baffled, like, wait, really? Clown?
Yeah.
And then you'd watch it and be like, oh no, this is even more confusing than the summary.
Yeah.
The next couple episodes are all the ones where Wong is scheming to kill Domon because he thinks Domon saw his lab when it was really Schwartz.
Yeah, and this is like part of like the dynamic that makes the Hong Kong section work so well is Wong and Master Asia setting up the fights for Domon, and like at first being on the same side because they both want to see Domon grow. You eventually learn that's because they want to make him the pilot, the replacement pilot for the Devil Gundam, and make him as strong as he could be. But in like Master Asia's like full on 100%, we should just like Domon's the man, and Wong becomes more and more suspicious both of Domon and of Master Asia, and that like rift growing between them is so satisfying. And Wong is a great character. He's a great character that you love to hate. Yes. It's very satisfying when he dies with his stupid fucking like nose tiny sunglasses.
Well, he's got those nose tiny sunglasses the whole time, and then in his last appearance, he tries to stop Domon from getting into space, and he's got all the DG Cybo in him, the DG cells, and he has the cells make him new sunglasses, which is such a perfect moment. That's a great episode too when we get there. But anyway, this next run of episodes are all ones where he is bringing back old opponents of Domon's who have like willingly given themselves to the Devil Gundam, like Mikkelo Chariot, Gentle Chapman, and you have these battles with them. One of them is a tag team where he has to fight with Allenby, and it's better than the tag team episode of Eva. But yes, so because that's the episode 34, Stand Up Domon Raging Tag Team Match. That was actually a really good fight, I think. As these fights go. But yes, there's a whole kind of like series there. And then this is when I say the last 15 episodes, that's because 35, which is 15 from the end, is when you start the run of, there are 4 final fights with the Shuffle Alliance members. So Domon versus Chibide, then versus George, then versus Sai Sai Shi, then versus Argo. And those 4 are so good. Yeah. And they are each, because I agree with you, I think the George Desand one is the best, but I think they all do a really good job like contextualizing those characters, giving them kind of a nice character revelation, giving them a cool new move, they each get one, giving Domon a piece of character development as he learns to fight them and also realizes how much he cares about these people as his friends. And then, of course, each one ends with the moment where Domon has won and they come to his side and agree to fight the Devil Gundam together as part of the Shuffle Alliance. So it's like he's building a team. It's everything you want. These 4 episodes, when I realized this was going to be the structure and I'm like, oh, they're going to do another 4 with these guys, I felt like a little bit like, oh boy, this feels a little late in the show to be doing this. And then they're really good. And it feels like exactly what the show needed.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're all great because I think the thing that makes these episodes work is like, because I think the best episodes generally with the Shuffle Alliance members are their introduction episodes and then these ones. Yeah. Because they're the ones that feel most focused on who these people are, and the other ones like have a lot of ancillary bullshit like the clown or whatever in it. You know, it's just like, or like Gentle Chapman, and it's like they're not necessarily focused on who George is and his character arc, whereas all of these, it's about, you know, Chibide now has to really stand by his belief in the American dream and all that kind of stuff. George has to like recontextualize for himself what it means to have honor and dignity and what that means for himself to have that versus doing that for his nation. Sai Saishi has to finally commit to, I want the restoration of the Shaolin Temple and like succeed on my father's legacy. And then Argo has to both like sort of bury the hatchet, with Andrew Graham and the Lumber Gundam. And then also like his is probably the least dynamic of those because his is also a lot of that screen time is shared with Allenby's stuff, but then that's also where they start resetting up a lot of the stuff with his crew for when that comes back in.
I really love that Argo one because you get it's the conclusion of the whole Andrew Graham arc where Andrew has to tag team with because it's kind of an Andrew episode and an Argo episode, but it's a really good episode of television and like it's very compelling, and I love the fight, and I love Allenby gets like hacked and goes berserker and all that, and then it's the end of that one is when Allenby gets taken away and Rain thinks it's the paramedics, but it's really Wong's guys.
Yeah, and Doman blames her.
Yes.
Yeah.
So like, this is when they really start getting into like the final run of the show. Like the narrative is kicking into place for the final sort of run of episodes. But yeah, they're really good. Love those characters. Love how they kind of bring them all together. I have to ask a question, Sean.
Yeah.
Okay, so Sai Shi wants to restore the Shaolin Temple, all that.
Uh-huh.
He's in with the Chinese government. What do you think happened to Neo Taiwan? Is there a missing episode where Neo Taiwan tried to enter a fighter and Sai Chi had to go like kill it, and we didn't see that?
When you take like complex political thing like entities like countries and governments and boil them down into I'm a floating imitation of the shape of the country in space with the word Neo in front of it, I think asking deeper political questions is a little bit troubling. Because
this obviously aired before the restoration of Hong Kong to mainland China, although even then it's still a separate entity, as evidenced by all the protests. But I do wonder that, and I do wonder how far Neo-Tibet made it in their development of a Gundam.
Yeah. So, they're fair questions.
The Dalai Lama Gundam. You know they would have done that.
Yes. No, I'm not saying that they wouldn't.
But yes, they probably wanted to air this show in China, hence there is no Neo Taiwan.
Yeah.
Sadly. We love you, Taiwan. All right, now this podcast won't air in China.
Good job, Jonathan.
That's okay. I don't think we have any Chinese. I don't know if ours can even be accessed in China. Probably not.
Yeah.
All right. So then we have another Master Asia episode, which is really good. This is when Doman first he snaps at Rain, which is really sad because he's really mean to Rain. And part of this show being good is that he does ultimately have to make up for it.
Yes.
Because Gundam has men who actually have to earn their masculinity.
Yes. Good. No. This is not. It doesn't do anything to Rain anywhere near as awful as like most of the shit that Shinji does.
It doesn't have him masturbate over Rain's.
Yeah. No, I was just trying to avoid
Okay.
saying a sentence like that.
Okay.
Because it upsets me.
It does. I really like this Master Age episode.
Oh, it's great. It's one of my favorite episodes of the show.
Because it's the one. Because from a plot standpoint, there's not a lot going on in this one. But what it does is it recenters that to show that there is still genuine affection between these two people. It's still alive. Doman still feels it. Master Asia still feels it. It's when they start shining a light on Master Asia having deeper motivations than just a villain.
Yeah.
It's also where I think you meet Fun Saiki the horse. I don't mean the Gundam version of the horse. I mean the horse.
I think this is the episode where they first use the footage of Fun Saiki getting the skin tight suit in the cockpit, which is maybe the best thing in the Gundam franchise. That 3 seconds of footage.
I mean, I don't know how we can overstate how cool it is that this show has a horse named Fun Saiki, who's a super cool horse on his own.
Yeah.
And Fun Saiki has his own Gundam that is also in the shape of a horse that he gets in and pilots the exact same way the humans pilot their Gundams.
Yes. No, it is that revelation because when Master Asia pops up in Neo Hong Kong in episode 25, he has the Fun Saiki horse mech, and the Master Gundam is riding on the horse. But you don't realize until now that that's not a drone robot. That is just another Gundam that is piloted by an actual horse. So he's piloting a Gundam that is riding a horse Gundam being piloted by his horse. That is the coolest thing ever. That is why Master Asia is the best character of the show. Fuck complex character psychology and all that shit. That is why. That is so cool. What a genius idea.
And they use it so well.
Yes.
Not just here, but also after Master Asia dies and Domon sort of takes possession of Fun Saiki.
Fun Saiki, this is the last time we shall shed tears for our master.
It's so good. It's probably one of my favorite moments in the whole series is at the end of episode, I think it's 46, where he goes into space on Funsaiki and he says like, the hooves of this horse will show us the path to love or something. Oh, it's so good. But anyway, this episode is also where we introduce the Sekiha Tenkyo Ken, the final move of the Toho Fukai School of Martial Arts.
Yeah, so he has passed on to Domon the last of what Master Asia has to pass on.
So good. Then episode 40 is the end of the Hong Kong section where he has his fight with Schwartz Bruder, the two undefeated fighters, and it's a really good fight.
Yes, yeah, this is one of the few that's like the fight itself feels like well because Schwartz Bruder has like a whole series of different moves he can use, and it's not like here's the like my one special move, and then you go block and that's gut finger, and then blow up my head, and the fight's over. There's like more to it.
I mean, they do kind of do that, but there is also
they
more
do
to
kind
it.
of do that, but at least Schwartz Bruder has more stuff that
Yes.
he can do to make it interesting up to that point.
They're also in like a ring that's rigged with. I love this detail. He rigs it with 5,000 bombs.
Yes. A lot of bombs.
It's a lot of bombs. You know,
this is also the episode where Rain, because Rain, after getting scolded by Domon, becomes kind of disaffected. She tenders her resignation with the Neo Japan team and stumbles into a man that looks mysteriously like Kyoji on the street, follows him into a warehouse that is holding the Gundam Spiegel, and then she's encountered by Schwartz Bruder. And I think at that point she probably kind of figures it out, but she doesn't fully just say like, "But you're Kyoji though, right? Huh?"
But she joins his team and she gets the same like German color mask to wear.
Which again, this show is a soap opera, and this is also when it reminded me that professional wrestling is also a soap opera. It exists in the soap opera family of genres because her showing up wearing the colors of the other team is the most like heel turn ass professional wrestling thing you could do, and it's so good. Like her like front hair bit popping out of like the eye hole of the mask, perfect.
I mean, in general, I think it's worth saying G Gundam probably has more in line with professional wrestling than it does like martial arts shows.
Yes, yeah.
Although it takes from martial arts a lot, its general tone is much more like it's that kind of scripted.
Yeah.
You know, you're gonna have your heel turns and your villains, and then he's gonna do his big move at the end that magically wins.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, and then we get the start of the Battle Royale, where we go to the island, and the Devil Gundam is back. And
really, I thought the Devil Gundam was destroyed in episode 24.
And there are 2 episodes here where, this whole stretch, from here to the end is phenomenal.
Yeah.
But 42 and 43 is the ones where Domon is trying to get up to the Devil Gundam, and in 42, it is Sai Shi and Argo who help him defeat Mikolo to get up there. And then in 43... it is, I'm getting this wrong. It's 41 is when it's those, and then it's 42, it's Chibide and George who come. And I think those 2 episodes where, like, they sacrifice themselves and, like, lose their place in the tournament to help Domon is so good. The battle choreography at this point is just really good. Just seeing them, like, make these basically suicide runs is amazing.
And, like, teaming up the abilities that each Shuffle Alliance member has with each other and combining them in fun ways, with the main one being fucking Chibide shooting the rose bit through his with his pistol as, like, the last piece of ammunition he has. That's the best bit of fighting choreography in this whole show.
And that's one of my favorite scenes. I actually tweeted out part of it because that scene is preceded by George and Chibide pouring one out with their respective nations' liquor. So George has champagne and Chibide has bourbon. Yeah. And they pour it on their Gundams, and then they break the bottles against the Gundams, and then they go to battle together. And yes, they have this amazing, it's very like Western, spaghetti Western final standoff where he's like, I've got one shot, he misses the first time, and so then they've got to go a second time, and he throws the rose bit, and he catches it, and then I forget the kiss-off line in... I should look it up, but he has the kiss-off line in English, he says, which is like, hey, big guy, or something like that. Yeah, and it's perfect. Couldn't be more perfect. It's very amazing.
Good. And of course, you know, they're not actually dead because this is not a Tomino show. If this was Tomino, they would be dead as shit.
Yes.
But they do survive, which is the right choice. Like, it would be so fucked up if they actually died. And then also like, in here you have Rain goes and gets the Rising Gundam, which is such a good, also just a very good Gundam design. It has like a big spear and then a bow. And this is where you get like, I think what is a really smart thing, because Rain, this is the 3rd time Rain has piloted a Gundam. And the first couple of times they have the animation when she gets into the suit, like the suit pushes her to the ground, and she's just like shoved against the ground and has to like rip her hand up out from the bottom of it to like make the suit like congeal around her hands and stuff. It just seems so painful. And then here she's like able to stand up and like just kind of fully take it, and like how much she has grown to be able to kind of like fight and do those things with Domon. It's very, and then she's just like goes and fights Alan B in the weird fucked up like walnut Gundam looking thing. Yeah, I don't know what that one's called.
Well, and those fights are really good. Like having her be the one to fight Alan B Beardsley is very good. All of that, like there's so many planes of climaxes going on here, because this is what I mean. Like you can't, it's hard to describe good payoff, but you know it when you see it.
Yeah.
And like having the different Shuffle Alliance members sacrifice themselves, and then what's going to happen with Kyoji and Master Asia and everything, like there's so much good paying off of all the groundwork they've laid, and it is so utterly satisfying in the way where like you're sitting on your couch and you want to get up and cheer for this show, you know? But episode 44 is the first of two very sad episodes in a row.
Yes.
Which is where Schwartz, as they say in the title, rests in grace, Domon's tearful attack. And that is where now we fully learn the backstory of Schwartz, which is that Kyoji was... So we should talk about the backstory we learned here, which is that everything Neo Japan told Domon was a lie sort of based on the truth.
Yes, that because in that episode 6, they specifically say that's like, Domon wasn't here for any of this stuff. He only arrives in Neo Japan in the aftermath of everything that happened, and they give him these hallucinations to like motivate him more, and they give him this like doctored version of what happens, like based around, you know, obviously Domon's mother actually dies, Kyoji actually takes the Devil Gundam and escapes to Earth. Domon's father is actually like cryogenically frozen after the trial and all of that. Like those things happen, but why any of those things happened, they sort of manufacture, and Domon doesn't know the truth.
Because what we learn is that his dad was the scientist who developed the Devil Gundam, but he developed it as the Ultimate Gundam.
Yes.
And he had these three properties of self-evolution, self-restoration, and what are the three?
Cloning, I think.
Yeah,
self-generation, like they can make new copies of itself.
And his plan was to send it to Earth to help restore Earth, which is kind of like a less bloody version of what Master Asia wants. But the military finds out about it. They want it for nefarious purposes. So Kyoji takes the Ultimate Gundam. His mom is killed protecting him. The father is arrested. Kyoji goes down to Earth. When it arrives on Earth, there's some kind of defect, like there's a short or something, and Kyoji is like taken over by the Devil Gundam, and he is kind of locked inside it as its life source. And in order to help Domon, he creates out of the DG cells an android clone of himself, which then goes and takes the place of the defeated Schwartz Bruder, which I do like this detail that there was a real, like, he didn't just come up with that shit, he took Neo Germany's stuff. So he could, like, he didn't just decide, like, I'm going to be a German ninja.
Yeah.
He was already a ninja, and he took a German identity.
Yeah, and you just get a very brief shot of a man wearing basically Schwarzbrüder's clothes, but he's got a big, ridiculous German, like, style, like, Bismarck-looking mustache on. It's like, okay, that's the German fighter. Yep, definitely.
It's great. And then in this episode, in a move that I think Tomino would be proud of.
Yes.
Domon has to kill his own brother, both versions of him, in order to stop the Devil Gundam. And it is very sad. Yeah,
it's fucked up. Like, this and then the next episode where Master Asia dies, it is a hell of a two-punch stretch. That is, because, and I think it helps kind of recenter the stakes from, you kind of know that his friends are not going to die, but there's still, like, significant cost to being paid here with because again, it's not just that Kyoji dies. It's also that like think of it, like everything that Domon like finds out here. That it's not just that my brother is still alive. It's that my brother also isn't the villain that everybody's been telling me. He is still the big brother that I knew and loved. Proof of that is he created a like android clone of himself to teach and protect me as I went on this journey. And now I must kill both this man who I've come to respect as like my teacher in Schwarzbrüder and the man from my past that I love so much who is my older brother Kyoji, knowing all the while that all that Kyoji's ever done has been to protect and nurture Domon. It's fucked up. That's some melodrama.
And also learning that his nation was lying to him the entire time.
He's been betrayed by everyone who's been guiding him along the way.
Yeah, and are nefarious villains. Like, he probably felt pretty jerked around by Neo Japan, but he didn't think they were literal bad guys.
Yes, that they like, Rain's father and Major Ube fucking, like, basically had, a kangaroo court cryogenically freeze Professor Kashu, Domon's father, just so that to silence the witnesses, right? Because he obviously knows everything that happened, which means almost certainly that, given that, like assuming everything happened the way that Neo Japan wanted, and Domon wins the Gundam fight, never finds out any about this shit, Domon's father was never going to. They were never going to unfreeze his dad. That was never going to happen.
They're probably going to kill Domon. I mean, that's
yeah.
So it's quite intense. It's not a good day to be Domon Kashu. But yeah, then we have Master Asia gets mad because Domon destroyed his beloved Devil Gundam, and they have their big final duel. Probably the best episode of the series.
It's the best episode of the series. Yeah. It's amazing.
It's a great fight. It's a cool moment, like having all the other characters watch and be like, "This is the best Gundam fight we'll ever see."
Yes, we have to see this through. Like, I don't care if we're standing like too close to the fight. It's like we must record this moment for history, basically.
Yes, it's because this is the end of the Gundam fight. This is the final battle. It's one thing I actually like about the pace of the show is that the Gundam fight finishes and then there's like dealing with all the aftermath. It's not just the very last episode. And after defeating him, Master Asia has to die in his arms, but only after they make their peace, and we get kind of the final exposition about Master Asia, and there's also Domon makes the argument to him that humans are also a part of nature. There's just so much good stuff here.
Yeah, and that moment where, because Master Asia, as they're fighting, reveals, because there's a running theme throughout the show that it's like the way that Schwarzbrüder in particular says this like twice every episode, I swear. That it's like, martial artists are clumsy people. The only way they can communicate is fist to fist. It's like he says that all the time, and like most of the other martial arts characters kind of reiterate that, and that's like one of the things that like Rain has to kind of learn about Domon and kind of understand about him is like he's an idiot that only knows what you mean if you punch him in the face. Basically, is the less poetic way of what that phrasing means. And so the only way that Master Asia and Domon can understand each other is to truly just go head-to-head, a death match between the two of them. And so, Master Asia is basically explaining everything that's happened and how, all the shit with, like, the Shuffle Alliance, and he participated in the last Gundam fight to see whether or not the Gundam fight was an appropriate way to, conduct warfare. Because one thing, they never really go into this, but it's heavily implied that, like, the Shuffle Alliance that Master Asia was a part of was not the first Shuffle Alliance. This is something that, like, the Shuffle Alliance goes back through all of human history. And it's like a group of, like, 5 special individuals who, like, guide humanity and, like, the warfare that humanity conducts. Like, it tries to make it as, like, sort of hospitable as it possibly can be. And I just love this, like, there's some sort of weird mystical force that exists totally unexplained in the G Gundam universe that is just passed down from, like, successor to successor in martial arts that are the 5 Shuffle Alliance members. Anyways, that was what he was trying to do as the King of Hearts, and in doing so, he realized that that the Gundam fight has these awful consequences, and that he contributed to it, and that's what kind of sets him down on the path that he's on. And I do love that moment where Domon sees this, like, well, you're wrong. Like, there's this thing you haven't accounted for. That's like you're trying to protect nature, but you're only trying to protect this one piece of nature that you're seeing, and you're not seeing the whole picture of it. And you've been kind of blinded by the emotions. It's like you do not have your Meikyo Shisui master. You are not actually tranquil of heart here, and that's why he loses. Is that he's not centered. And can't see the whole.
Domon actually surpasses his master.
Yes, exactly, which is the whole point. And it's like that's just like the martial arts fable of G Gundam is Domon growing and surpassing the master. And that moment where Domon wins and like deals the final blow, and it cuts to Master Asia in the cockpit, and Master Asia, who's just been like frothing mad, yelling, it's like you idiot pupil of mine, like you don't understand, and just kicking Domon's ass, and then he finally gets beaten, and it cuts back to Master Asia, and he just looks totally relaxed, and his like big like Chinese like martial arts braid thing comes undone, and he has this just like small smile on his face, and he says, "You've done well, Domon." And then it cuts back to Domon, and he goes, "Shisho! My master!" And it's like he realizes that this is that he has been fighting his master that he knew the whole time. in this fight. It's like the person who helped raise Domon is the same person that he's been fighting. That is not someone else. There's that great moment where while they're on the beach where Master Asia is like, "Look, Domon, I did everything I did, and there was not a single DG cell in my entire body."
I really like that moment because that was, I think, going through this the first time was kind of my prediction, was that he must have DG cell or something, right? Like not for the whole show, but like when he first becomes a villain.
Yeah.
And I love that they fully take it off the table, and it's like, no, I'm a human. I had these thoughts. Like they really commit to, this was the character with psychological depth.
Yeah.
You know, and it's a beautiful moment. And then they clasp hands, and they say the words together.
Yes. The East is burning red.
The school of Tohofuhai, the winds of kings, Zenshin, Keiretsu, Tempa Kyoran. Look, the East is burning red. Oh my god! If you can keep your eyes dry through that,
I think it's the saddest death scene in the whole franchise. Like, I mean, it's supposed to be because
I get it. Yeah, you're right.
The melodrama of it, because this is also, it's this scene, and then it's the scene with Kyoji at the end of the last episode. Then they use it with some of the rain stuff in the last episode of the show, is where Koei Tanaka brings back the Shining Finger theme from the first half of the show, but it's this big, like, massive version of it that's so tragic sounding. Like, it's probably my favorite track on the soundtrack, and it's just so, you know, it's that thing of like, it plays with your like nostalgia for the early parts of the series because it's using this melody you haven't heard in a while, while like really heightening it in the drama and tragedy of the way it sounds. And it's like, while that's playing, it's impossible.
Oh, and the scene is so well directed. Like, I've got some of the frames here, Sean, like every composition, and then ending with the words of their like speech.
Yeah, their motto. In
kanji, like in Chinese, I think.
Yes.
On screen. And as Domon is like grieving over his master's body.
As the sun is rising.
Yeah. God, it's so fucking good. But the show's not done.
No, it's not.
And again, I think this show being really smart about what it is and like this show always knows what's like kind of best for it.
Yeah.
And it knows, as important as Master Asia was, you can't end on that.
No.
It has to be about Domon and Rain. And so the finale, the final 4 episodes are Rain is kidnapped by Ulube. She is put into the remains of the Devil Gundam because they think she will be the best life force for it. And now Domon, it's not just about rescuing Rain, but it's about symbolically paying back everything she gave him.
Yeah.
And also kind of coming into his feelings, which we'll talk about when we get to the finale, that I found a pretty remarkable moment, because I can't think of a comparable thing in a shonen anime.
Yeah. Where
a male character has to make that kind of declaration, and he says all the things he needs to say. It's not any reading between the lines. It's a really remarkable ending.
Yes, yeah.
But let's talk about how we get there. So you said you weren't 100% on Ulube being kind of a villain here at the end.
I mean, I think it's fine. I just think there's a hard transition the show needs to try to make of like, what needs to happen is the Doma and Rain stuff has to happen. And I think like, you know, and I think a lot of the framing of that, particularly in that last episode where they're inside the Devil Gundam and it's this weird like frozen version of Rain and all that, like that imagery is so great. But it's like having to wrap that all up in like all these big fights they have with Urube, and Urube's just like apparently fucking jacked as shit. It's like, it makes you realize that like, oh right, like nobody else in this show is like muscular. They're martial artists, but they're just like people. And then he's just fucking Arnold Schwarzenegger over here.
Well, because they even give him a little backstory that he was the previous Neo Japan Gundam fighter, and he says he's got this whole like, he's giving a speech to him. He's soliloquizing.
Yes.
And he says like, and that is why I have kept myself in shape all these years in case I ever needed to go back into combat. And he rips his shirt off, and he looks like Sylvester Stallone under there. Yeah, it's pretty
fucking
good.
Jacked. But I think the difficulty for me the show runs into here is that like, Urube is not set up effectively as himself as a villain. It's just the idea of like the Neo Japan people that fucked over Domon, but especially coming down from Master Asia and even Wong, who I think was like a much better version of that kind of like antagonist. Like Urube just doesn't have enough space, and they didn't commit early on enough to like building that up actually effectively. Like there's you know that he's going to be evil. Like again, he's got a weird little mask metal thingy on his head. You know the guy's going to be evil. He's one of the people who does the fucked up shit to him in episode 6. But I don't necessarily think like the fight itself feels a bit tedious because you know that's like, this is not about this fight with Urube. It's just about getting to Rain and having the talk with Rain, and this is just kind of stopping us from getting to that point.
I think it works for me because you need someone from Neo Japan that Domon can punch in the face for what they've done, because they were the ultimate like puppet masters behind the scenes of all this. And it's, you know, it's fairly brief. And the 2 episodes that sort of that goes across, 47 and 48, has so much good stuff. Like the Shuffle Alliance coming to space on Nastasha's ship with all of Argo's crew. That's awesome. That's just such a great everyone coming together moment. You have all the stuff with Rain's father, Dr. Mikamura, who we've learned was also in on this but regrets it, and him making up. There's the great scene at the end of 47 where he is trying to free Domon's father from the cryogenic sleep, and with his last like ounce of life, he hits the button and the glass beneath them breaks and he gets sucked out into space and dies, and Domon's father's capsule goes out so Nastasha can get it. There's just so much satisfying stuff like that. 48 also has all of the Gundams from around the world come to space to help in the fight. How can you not love that? That's fantastic.
So all that stuff is really good. I think it's when it cuts back to, and now the Shuffle Alliance members are fighting Utube in like the big dumb, like all 4 of the 4 Heavenly King Gundams are fused together to this big dumb thing.
Yeah.
It's like that thing just doesn't look good. It doesn't allow for any interesting fights because it's just like big, and that's the only thing that's powerful about it. Like anytime it cuts back to that stuff, it's just like none of this can be that interesting because Utube has no like depth anywhere as a villain. Like it's all the stuff around that I think is good.
That's totally fair, and I get that. I do want to give a shout out to Domon at the end of episode 46 when he is going off into space. He gets onto Fun Saiki and he says, I have it here, anyone who tries to thwart another's love shall be sent to hell by the hooves of this horse. And then he has, in this shot, you can see right here, Sean, how he kills Wong is he kicks the head of Wong's Gundam off with Fun Saiki's hooves.
Yeah.
Fucking great shot. This is what I mean when I say G Gundam is so well directed, because they don't have the money to do like a ton of frames of animation there, but they can make a shot that looks like that is such good like boarding and planning and everything. It's so good. Love it. Yeah. And then forgot about this. This is from the end of the show where he's on Fun Saiki with everyone else going off into space and it totally looks like Sailor Moon or something. Or Power Rangers. Anyway. Yeah. So the final episode though, in the grand tradition of Gundam series having great series finales. Oh yeah. G Gundam totally slots right on in with all the other ones. Not as dark as like Zeta Gundam by any means, but very good. And like I said, I think it's really remarkable that what the show ultimately comes down to isn't a big final fight. And again, because the show knows that's not really what it's about. Yeah. It is him getting out of his Gundam, like naked, like not literally naked, but you know what I mean. He doesn't have a big metal suit on, and saying to Rain, I'm sorry, you are important to me, you did all of these things for me, I didn't pay it back, I love you, I need you, I want you. Yeah. And then she comes out and they do their awesome move that includes the word love, love. Yes. Which is incredible.
Yeah, the love, love, Sekiha Tenkyoken. Yes. And yeah, they make like a heart and it shoots a giant heart through the Devil Gundam. And then the Devil Gundam just has a giant hole where its chest is that is shaped like a cartoon heart.
And in one level, that is so hokey and silly in the most beautiful soap opera way. But on the other hand, I do think there's like a level of vulnerability and like a consideration of masculinity that I think is a hallmark of Gundam to me. Yeah. Because Tomino, that's so much of how he treats his male characters is like, there's no like macho male characters who just get to be cool dudes. Like there's a lot under the surface, and like gender is something that's questioned and explored. And I think that as much as Domon is kind of a meathead, his ultimate like point of growth being having to get out of the Gundam and saying those words, I can't think of a comparable moment in an anime like this. That's really impressive to me.
Yeah, it takes the romance dynamic really seriously. And I think it's just, the show understands the dynamic between its two leads really effectively. Yeah. Because it is, Domon's like, problem is that he's so focused on whatever's in front of him that he's not aware of what's going on around him. And that even though he obviously cares a lot about Rain, it means that he ends up hurting her because he's not really paying attention to her when he says things like when he gets mad after the Allenby stuff. And it's like, you know, there's examples constantly throughout the whole series. Some of them played for laughs, some of them played more dramatically, but it's a constant character trait of his that manifests in his Rain relationship. And it's also the thing that like Schwarzenegger is constantly telling him. It's like, dude, you got to broaden your mind. You have to calm down. You have to center yourself. Like, if you just go in half-cocked, angry about whatever it is, or emotional about whatever it is, you're never going to be able to, like, understand what's happening and solve the problems you're dealing with. And that's true of his relationships with Master Asia, with his relationship with Neo Japan and the Gundam fight, and it's true of his relationship with Rain. And then on the other hand, Rain, her problem is that she takes everything too seriously. Like, there's a great moment where after Domon explodes at Rain after the Allenby stuff, and she goes and defects to Neo Germany, Domon's riding in the car with Professor Mikamura, her father, and he tells her, like, you're the one who did this. You're the one who pushed her away. This is your responsibility. She takes everything too seriously. She has too strong a sense of responsibility. That she's a doctor and, like, a mechanical engineer. Like, everything she does is, like, as someone who, like, takes care of everything. Like, she's the ultimate mom, basically. Which I can think there's, like, a certain gender thing there that's a little bit dated. But they execute the character dynamic really effectively, that it's, like, very thoroughly established with her character, and it's so consistent. That's always what she's trying to do at the complete detriment of herself. So it's like Domon is a character that needs to learn to be more selfless, and Rain is a character that needs to be more selfish and advocate for herself and her wants and her desires. And they culminate in that conclusion really effectively by Domon having to finally kind of decide, like, hey, I need to tell you these things and, like, really consider your feelings. And then Rain has to sort of let go of this kind of, like, self-destructive idea she has that, like, her being around people is going to get in their way and stuff like that, which is, you know, that kind of mindset that she has throughout the show. And then they shatter together. She's, you know, she's, like, literally wearing a red dress, which is made out of Domon's cape, and they shoot a heart through the Devil Gundam, and then he, like, cradles her in his arms, and they ride away on a white fucking stallion. Like, it is as blatant a, like, Prince Charming style, like, love, like, it's literally just love wins the day. It's that ending fully committed to, and I don't think I've ever seen that style of ending actually fully committed to, because it's never looked like this, and this is basically what it should look like.
And you have 48 episodes of these characters building up. Like,
yes.
like you buy Rain as a character, you buy Domon as a character. It's building on things that have been, like, you just gave the whole spiel about, like, what are their respective faults and how do they come together. I also want to give praise to the voice actor Seki, who does, like, his final monologue as Domon, selling that transition from him being, like, kind of an angry meathead, which he is a lot of the time, to being in his feelings. It's beautifully performed.
Yeah.
It's so well done. Yeah, it's a great scene. I love that they get to defeat the Devil Gundam together, you know? Yes. It's because this is a more male-centric Gundam show than any of the Tomino ones.
Yeah, there's only a small handful of female characters.
But I think it makes up for that in having an actual, like, complex view of masculinity that is not, like, overly simplistic or harmful. I think it's actually this would be a really good message for kids to see.
Yeah.
You know, this is great. And that you get when, like, Rain does get to be at the heart of big moments of victory like this, you know? Like,
yeah, and she multiple times gets to pilot the Gundam, and I like that whenever she pilots the Gundam, she's very effective. It's never, like, even, like, it's a struggle for her to get into the suit, but, like, once she's, like, there and doing it, like, she accomplishes whatever she's trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
Which I really like that it's never, like, this is the only time that she's damseled in the whole show, and I think it's, like, it's a fair character dynamic to play at this point. Yeah, like, I think it's, like, their treatment of the material here, like, it doesn't have the, like, rich ensemble of, like, really varied female characters that we get in most of our other Gundam shows, but the ones that are here, which is mainly Rain and Allenby, are treated really well. And
it's night and day to something like Stardust Memory, which is around the same time in the OVA world, and is very bad at all these things.
Yes. So, or, you know, just as Evangelion, which we talked about on the last episodes.
Yeah, so if we're keeping it within Gundam, Stardust Memory. If we're keeping it without Gundam, hoo boy.
Yeah.
Eva, what the fuck? All right, last couple of thoughts.
Yeah, there's a couple of things you need to mop up.
The undisputed MVP of Mobile Fighter G Gundam
is
Kohei motherfucking Tanaka, whose music is out of this world. Like, whether you think it's the best Gundam score or one of the best, it's clearly, like, God tier music.
Yes, it's not just one of the best Gundam scores, it's one of the best anime scores, in my opinion.
The way I put it, you know, when I tweeted about this was, every Gundam show has great music, and they do. Not every Gundam show has Kohei Tanaka music. Mm-hmm. And he is just special. Like, you just look at what he's done, because he is the house composer for One Piece, which has, like, for a show that long running, like, notably great music. He did the Gravity Rush games, which we both put on our top 10 game soundtracks of all time. He does the Sakura Wars games. And he's done several anime, including the 8th MS team, which has wonderful Gundam music.
Absolutely.
But G Gundam, man, there's so much of it, for one. Like there's more than I think you would get in an anime of this length.
Yeah, especially they do a smart thing, I think, where they basically bring in almost entirely new music for the second half of the show. It's in the same style, so it feels coherent, but it is like, like the big finisher music they use with the Bakunett's Godfinger is different than the Shining Finger theme, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and just like the amount he plays with instrumentation and tone and like genre at points.
Yeah, like each fighter from each country basically gets a different theme. Like George has a whole suite of music that's very like royal court music. Sai Saishi has, I think some of my favorite stuff is all the Chinese music that both Sai Saishi gets, and then the different themes for Neo Hong Kong. That's some of the best stuff, I think.
Yeah, and it actually sounds like someone who did their homework, and this sounds like actual Chinese music, not like just they put in a couple of Chinese instruments.
Yeah. I like how, because a lot of Kohei Tanaka's like sort of standard approach to music has a very jazzy feel to it. And for Chibude Crockett, he wanted America to have jazz music, so he just made it extra jazz. It's just even more jazzy than a lot of like the standard themes in the show, and I think it's so good.
And like the signature instrument of the whole show is the saxophone.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about me, the quickest way to my heart is the fucking saxophone. That's one of the reasons I love Bruce Springsteen's music, because of Clarence Clemens. Mm-hmm. And there's so much sax in this show, and it is all good, and it is smooth, and it is beautiful. And I just could not love it anymore if I tried. I really think a significant portion of why this show is so good is the music.
Oh, absolutely. I think like that's not a joke. Like that is the I think one of the reasons why the formulaic structure to the fights and all of that works is like, the Shining Finger is like the greatest finishing move. It is so pure. It's just the hand glows, reaches out, grabs the head of the enemy, squeezes, and it explodes. All while the guy yells out his fucking catchphrase and ends it with "Hisatsu Shining Finger," and then blows up the guy's head. And that's great, but it would only maybe be able to carry a couple of episodes on the back of just like that whole concept in the animation. But the Shining Finger theme and then the subsequent Bakunett's Godfinger theme when you get to the second half of the show are so good. Every single time they kick into whole like high gear, it's just like you've taken me away. Like I don't care. Like I don't care if this is literally the exact same scene I've seen like the last 5 fucking episodes of this show. It would be nice if there's maybe a little bit more variety here, but I am fine with this being what it is because it is so satisfying. The emotions of the music, there's a lot of layering of different leitmotifs throughout that is really great. Like a lot of like recontextualizing the different themes and stuff like that.
It sweeps you up in the way a good John Williams score does, or the way Howard Shore Lord of the Rings does. Just like pick your favorite movie score. Joe Hisaishi for Miyazaki movies. Someone who just like their music is a huge part of why you are so emotionally invested. Fucking Persona, we love. Just name me, whatever your thing is, and it's so true of G Gundam. And it's incredible. I love listening to those soundtracks. They've helped me through grading some papers. It's great stuff.
Yeah, it also has some really great insert songs, particularly the Chinese ones in the second half. I love, but there's a bunch throughout the whole show.
I love the theme songs and the end themes. The Flying in the Sky is one of my very, very, very favorite Gundam openings. I did not skip it even once. I skipped the second theme song a couple times because I think it's good, but it's not as good.
I really like Trust You Forever.
Oh, I love it, but Flying in the Sky oh man, it's my jam. I love it so much.
Interesting piece of trivia. He is not credited, but it is well known that the person who storyboarded the Flying in the Sky OP, the animation that plays, is Hideaki Anno.
That's wild.
It's very wild. Yeah. I will say that there is a sequence in the Trust You Forever OP, the second one, that I just like the animation.
I know what you're
I
saying.
Adore. Is the Master Asia
doing his moves,
and
then
coming into mirrored with Schwarzbrüder, and then it comes over to Schwarzbrüder.
Yes,
it is. I have a insane dopamine rush every single time that section of animation plays in the Trust You Forever OP. It's so good.
I knew you were going to say that because I think that I was going to say that too.
Yeah, I think there's something about I think Flying in the Sky is the superior one, but there's something about the tone of Trust You Forever that hits the character. The lighter character feel of G Gundam because it's a much softer song. That in those couple of moments is that, and I also love the Argo section of that opening where it's him standing in a whole crowd of people, but he's 2 feet taller than everybody else, and just shutters in on his face. It's very good.
It's very good. No, and this is the rare show with a great first opening where I don't get sad when they change the opening, because the second opening also feels fitting and like it fits for that half of the show and stuff. It's like Victory Gundam, I got sad when they switched theme songs because the second theme song is it's fine, but it's not.
Yeah, but it's not as good.
No, it's not stand up to the Victory. This is great. You don't lose whichever one you're watching.
Yeah, and the second ending is also so good. I adore that one because especially the animation. Like I like the song a lot, but the animation of like Rain coming in to kiss Doman on the cheek, and it just like not quite getting there and echoing through forever until at the very end she kisses him. Yeah, and then it's like a big panoramic shot of all the cast together. That's just
it's great.
It's great. It's conceptually like really well executed.
Yeah. And I like the first ending song as well too. The animation is kind of dull, but the song, all the songs. There's no bad music in G Gundam. It's all great.
Yeah, it's great across the board. Other stuff I wanted to talk about, because we didn't like talk about it directly, but I think it's so cool. Is the Devil Gundam. Yeah. Just in general, like conceptually, the way they executed on it. It's like, in some ways, it seems like a weird fit for this show. Like, it's like so alien, and like even for like Gundam, like in general as a franchise, it's such a strange thing. But it's so cool. And I just love the like conception of it's this weird like bio Gundam thing that's like, has the three principles of evolving itself, regenerating, and all that stuff. But I love that the way that it like replicates itself is it just makes like weird Gundam heads. Even like too, like its basic design is like the torso of a Gundam sitting on top of another giant Gundam head that then creates other Gundam heads. And this idea that like it's this weird mishmash that shouldn't work of like the very mechanical defined structure and like silhouette of a Gundam, not just a mobile suit from Gundam, but a Gundam with like the head and the V and all that stuff. But it being made biological and self-replicating, and so it's that combination of like the head of a Gundam is so iconic and such a like incredibly defined thing, and seeing it be like the way that the Devil Gundam understands to replicate itself in this like weird corrupted form is just like reproduce these monstrous versions of Gundam heads, and as the show goes on, they just get more and more creepy and fucked up until by the end it's like taken over the whole earth, and it's just got giant evil like devil wings and stuff. It's so good.
I love that they didn't try to make a like big hulking normal style mobile suit for him to fight, because I don't know how you would have made that work in this show, but making it this thing that you don't even know kind of how to attack it, and it always is different every time you see it. That's so effective. And I think the Lovecraftian comparison is good. It's definitely in those final episodes when it's like sending stalks down to Earth and everything. It's an eerie antagonist. But I think it's within the like general tone of this show, very well calibrated.
Yeah, it's the Devil Gundam is awesome. I love it to death.
Well, I also think this show is awesome, and I love it to death. Is there anything else to say about it before we wrap for today?
I think we covered most of it. It's
very
really
exhaustive. Yes. It's a great show.
It's a great show. It's like a big left turn for Gundam, and again, like Gundam doesn't go back to doing something like this until you get to Build Fighters, which is still like very much its own thing, but takes some inspiration from this. But it's a weird fucking show, but it is very good. Abso-fucking-lutely.
Next time, whenever we get around, when we've had time to watch it and everything, our next Weekly Suit Gundam will be on Gundam Wing, which I think is a big kind of full circle moment, because Gundam Wing is what brought Gundam to America effectively. Yep. And I don't really know anything about it, but I think a lot of our listeners, it's probably the show you can most trust they know something about.
Absolutely. It is the show that introduced Gundam as a franchise to the West, 100%.
So, any preview for us before we move on to Gundam Wing?
Just be very, very careful, Jonathan, who you hand out birthday party invitations to, because they might not respond to it the way you'd expect.